The station was supposed to be empty. No crew, no life signs, just an old relay drifting in the dark. But when we docked, the lights were still on, doors opened by themselves, and the system kept repeating one line, orbit stable. No anomalies detected. We thought it was just a glitch, until we realized the station was still receiving orders from someone who shouldn't exist. This is the silent orbit, where silence isn't peace, it's the sound of something watching you.
The void stretched out before them, an endless black canvas punctuated only by distant stars and the dim outline of a rogue planet drifting silently in the cold of space. Captain Elena Voss stood at the viewport of the salvage ship, the Nebula Runner, watching as their destination came into sharper focus. The derelict space station orbited the planet in a slow, lethargic dance, its hull dark and scarred, a relic abandoned to the void. Elena's jaw tightened. Years of experience had taught her that silence in space often concealed more than emptiness. The station's telemetry data was erratic. Systems blinked on and off unpredictably. Status report, she demanded, her voice steady but taut with anticipation. Power fluctuations remain unstable, Malik Arman replied, eyes glued to his monitor. His fingers danced over the controls, running scans that revealed no immediate life signs inside the station. But there are brief bursts of system activity, momentary flickers, nothing consistent. Jack Simmons leaned forward, smirking despite the tension. Ghosts in the machine. Or maybe just a power surge from the old circuits coming back to life. Don't joke, Jax, Lena Ortega said softly, her fingers hovering over the comm panel as she listened intently. Suddenly, a faint crackle drifted through the comms, an indistinct voice. Fragmented, like a half-remembered whisper carried from the past. Did you hear that? Elena's voice lowered. Replay that, Lina. The communication officer's fingers flew over the interface. The voice came again, garbled, distant, a fragment of a conversation long ended. Everyone fell silent, listening to the ghostly echoes of transmissions that seemed to seep through the station's walls. Sergei Volkov crossed his arms, his expression grim. Could be interference from the rogue planet's magnetic field, or a malfunctioning relay. Either way, we should be ready for anything. Elena nodded. Prepare for boarding, we proceed with caution. This station isn't as empty as it looks. The crew dispersed to ready their gear. Inside the ship's briefing room, the holographic map of the station flickered into life. Elena traced their intended path, her finger lingering over entry points and known system hubs. We'll split into two teams. Malik, you and Jax take the environmental and engineering sectors. Lina, Sergei and Mira will handle communications and security. Tariq, you on standby for pilot support. We maintain comms at all times. No unnecessary risks. Jax cracked a half smile, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Got it, Captain. Let's hope this place doesn't have any surprises. As the Nebula Runner edged closer, the station's hull appeared to pulse faintly, lights blinking erratically, shadows shifting as if the structure itself breathed in the void. Elena's heart pounded, a familiar knot of dread tightening in her chest. The eerie silence was oppressive, broken only by the subtle hum of the ship's systems and the distant echoes of long-forgotten voices. Boarding party ready, Elena announced, donning her suit. Remember, stay sharp. This station has secrets. The airlock cycled open with a hiss, revealing the darkened corridor beyond. The crew stepped through, their boots echoing softly on the metal floors. Shadows clung to the corners, and the faintest whispers seemed to brush past their ears, half-heard murmurs from a time lost. Elena paused at the threshold, eyes scanning the dim interior. Keep comms live. Report anything unusual immediately. Malik's scanner beeped softly. Environmental readings are stable, but I'm picking up irregular electromagnetic pulses. Jax crouched beside a terminal, fingers flying over the cracked interface. Locked down tight, but I'm in. Let's see what secrets you're hiding. The station's systems flickered again, lights sputtering before plunging the hallway into darkness. The crew froze, the silence swallowing their breaths. Then, faintly, a voice echoed, a fragment of a warning, a name, a plea lost to time. Elena's grip tightened on her comm. "Stay close. We're not alone here." Outside, the rogue planet loomed large, indifferent and cold, a silent sentinel to the unfolding mystery within the silent orbit. The salvage mission had begun, but the true challenge was only just awakening. The airlock hissed open with a reluctant sigh, spilling the stale, recycled atmosphere of the derelict station into the salvage crew's suits. Captain Elena Voss was the first to step through, her boots clicking softly on the metal floor beneath a ceiling of flickering lights. Behind her, the rest of the team followed, their movements cautious, weapons and tools at the ready. The station's interior was a labyrinth of dark corridors, each hallway swallowing their headlamps' beams into pools of shadow. The silence was oppressive, a living thing that pressed against their eardrums and rattled their nerves. Malik Arman moved quickly to scan the nearest console, his portable diagnostic device emitting quiet beeps as it registered fluctuating energy levels. "Systems are unstable," he reported, voice steady despite the tension gripping his chest. "Life support is functional but erratic. Environmental controls are fluctuating beyond normal parameters." Jack Simmons crouched before a locked terminal nearby, fingers flying across his hacking deck. "Give me a minute," he muttered, frustration evident as security protocols resisted his attempts. These locks are old but layered with some kind of adaptive encryption. Whoever left this place didn't want anyone coming back easily. The team moved as a unit, but unease crept beneath their practiced coordination. The silence was punctuated by faint, inexplicable noises, a distant clang, a whisper of static, the creak of metal settling in the cold void. Lena Ortega's voice was a hushed bomb, keeping anxious chatter at bay as she relayed their status to the ship. Sergei Volkov's bulk shadowed the rear, eyes sharp, muscles taut, guarding against threats both real and imagined. As they ventured deeper, the corridors narrowed and the air grew colder. Panels flickered with intermittent power surges, casting eerie light that made the walls seem to breathe. Shadows twisted out of the corner of their eyes, only to vanish when looked at directly. Malik paused at a junction, scanning the ambient psychic field sensors he'd brought along. The readings spiked erratically, defying his attempts to rationalize. Did anyone else hear that? Lina whispered, her eyes wide as a faint, spectral echo of a voice drifted through the comms, an unintelligible murmur that vanished as quickly as it came. Jax's smirk faltered, replaced by a tight line. "This place is playing with our heads." Captain Voss's gaze hardened. "Stay focused. We were here for salvage, not ghost stories, but be alert." Minutes stretched into hours as they mapped the station's interior, uncovering signs of hasty abandonment, scattered personal effects, flickering logs with fragmented data, and corridors scarred by unknown forces. The atmosphere thickened with an unspoken dread, each creak and whisper a reminder of the station's dark past. In a brief moment of solitude, Elena opened her journal, the pen scratching softly as she wrote, "The silence here is suffocating. Every shadow feels alive, every sound a warning. I can't shake the feeling that we're not alone, but not in any way we understand yet." Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden alarm. A console near Jack sparked and died, the lights plunging the corridor into darkness. A collective breath was held, then Malik's voice pierced the gloom. "Power fluctuations are worsening. We need to secure the main control hub and stabilize systems before this place collapses around us." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. This was no ordinary salvage operation. The station itself seemed a trap woven from silence and shadow. As they pressed onward, the grip of the void tightened, promising that the first step into this forgotten world was far from their last. The unknown waited in every corner, and the silence was its herald. What lay beyond would test the limits of their minds and the strength of their bonds. But for now, the salvage crew had only one choice: move forward into the void and face the echoes that lingered in the silent orbit. The airlock hissed open with a muted sigh, casting a sliver of harsh, artificial light into the station's shadowed interior. Captain Elena Voss led the way, her boots echoing softly on the cold metal floor as the salvage crew stepped cautiously into the derelict space station. The corridors stretched before them like the skeleton of an abandoned beast, walls scarred by time and neglect, yet still holding whispers of life once so vibrant. Dra. Malik Arman paused to scan the environment, his instruments flickering erratically in the dim light. Environmental readings are stable but inconsistent, he muttered, eyes darting over fluctuating data. There are localized anomalies, temperature drops, electromagnetic pulses, nothing we can fully explain yet. Jack Simmons, ever restless, crouched by a doorway where a holoscreen sputtered weakly, attempting to hack into a locked terminal. These systems are ancient, but someone's been here recently, he said, fingers flying across his portable deck. Or, something's messing with the controls. Elena's gaze swept the hallway. Faint outlines of personal belongings lay scattered, crumpled clothing, half-finished meals frozen in time, photographs yellowed with age. The silence was oppressive, not just the absence of sound, but a tangible void that seemed to swallow even the smallest noise. They entered what appeared to be the living quarters. The room was cluttered but eerily preserved. A cracked holo frame flickered to life, casting ghostly images of the original crew in moments of laughter, camaraderie, and quiet reflection. Elena's breath caught. They were here, she whispered, not just the station, but the people, their lives. Lina Ortega moved among the group, her voice soft but steady. We need to stay focused. Remember, this place is a tum and a puzzle. The more we understand them, the better we can navigate what's left behind. Malik approached the terminal again, now displaying fragmented logs, snippets of communications, personal notes, and cryptic warnings. Distorted audio crackled through the comms, whispers of conversations that seemed to teeter on the edge of sanity. The psychological strain was intense, Malik said, voice tight with concern. They were isolated out here, disconnected from everything. It must have been unbearable. Elena stepped aside, pulling her personal recorder from her jacket. She began speaking quietly, her voice a fragile thread in the silence. Captain's log. Day 3 aboard the station. The weight of this place presses down like gravity. I keep thinking of the crew I lost before, wondering if I'm leading these people down the same path. She paused, eyes closing briefly as memories surged beneath her composed exterior. The guilt she carried was a shadow she could not outrun. Jax glanced nervously at the flickering shadows dancing along the walls. This place messes with your head, he muttered, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Feels like the station's alive somehow, watching us. Lina placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We stick together and we keep talking. Silence is the enemy here. The crew's footsteps resumed, each member haunted by their own visions and fears. The station was more than a relic. It was a vessel of suffering, a monument to isolation and despair. Yet, within its walls lay the key to survival, if only they could unlock the secrets buried in the echoes of the past. As Elena recorded her thoughts, a soft, distant hum vibrated through the station's frame. The silence was no longer absolute, it was punctuated by the faintest heartbeat of something unseen, waiting. The corridor lights flickered again, casting long, convulsing shadows that seemed to dance deliberately on the cold, metallic walls of the derelict station. Jack Simmons hunched over a failing terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard in a frantic attempt to override the system faults that had plagued their operations since they boarded. The usual hum of electronics was punctuated by sudden, inexplicable glitches. Screens would momentarily display distorted images, then snap back to black. It's like the station itself is fighting us, Jax muttered, eyes narrowed as the terminal darkened once more, then flickered back to life with a cascade of static. A whisper echoed faintly through the comms, unintelligible but unmistakably human in tone. Jax glanced over his shoulder, his smirk fading under the pressing weight of unease. You see that? Shadows moving over there. Lina Ortega's voice crackled through the comms, tinged with a rare note of alarm. She was stationed near the communications hub, her warm brown eyes scanning the flickering monitors as the oppressive silence pressed in like a physical force. Elsewhere, Malik Arman adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his attention glued to the portable psychic scanner he'd cobbled together from salvaged components. The readings were erratic surges of energy that defied known physics, flickering like distant stars caught in a storm. He scribbled notes rapidly, his usual calm under pressure beginning to fray as distorted flashbacks washed over him. Memories, not his own, fragments of the station's past crew struggling with isolation and despair, intruded on his thoughts, blurring lines between reality and hallucination. These readings, they were unlike anything I've seen, Malik whispered, voice low as he wrestled with the implications. It's as if the station's environment is alive, reacting to our presence. Captain Elena Voss stood apart from the group, her tall frame silhouetted in the dim light of a deserted chamber. The shadows behind her shifted with unnatural fluidity, as if observing her with silent intent. Her breath was steady, but her eyes betrayed a quiet storm within. She held a small recorder in one hand, speaking softly as if confessing to an unseen confidant. "Day 4, she intoned, voice steady despite the churning turmoil beneath. "The crew is fractured. Jax's technical issues are no longer random. Malik's scientific detachment is faltering. Lina and Sergei are locked in a struggle for control, emotional versus physical security. I fear the silence is not just absence, but an entity watching, waiting." Back in the bowels of the station, Sergei Volkov's broad shoulders tensed as he patrolled the dim corridors. His protective instinct screamed at him to tighten security, to prepare for threats beyond human understanding. When Lena approached, her steady voice sought to temper his growing paranoia. "Sergei, we need calm, not aggression," she urged. "This tension will tear us apart." He shook his head, the lines of stress deepening on his shaved scalp. "Calm won't keep us alive. Not out here. Not with whatever this is." The clash between them was emblematic of the crew's unraveling unity, as subtle fractures widened into dangerous chasms. Shadows whispered secrets in the dark, memories warped and twisted, and the oppressive silence grew heavier with each passing hour. The station was no longer a mere relic to salvage. It had become a living nightmare, its intangible presence seeping into the minds of those who dared to enter. As night fell over the rogue planet's orbit, the crew found themselves trapped in a growing web of dread and suspicion. The echo entity was stirring, its silent orbit tightening like a noose. Trust was the first casualty. And in the emptiness of space, where no one could hear a scream, the shadows whispered, and the silence listened. The question lingered unspoken but ever present. What waits beyond the light, in the shadows that whisper? The answer, it seemed, was watching them back. The air within the station seemed to thicken, pressing against the crew's lungs with an invisible weight. The silence, once merely unsettling, now felt oppressive, an intangible force gnawing at the edges of their sanity. Captain Elena Voss sat alone in her quarters, the dim light of the control panel casting cold shadows across her sharp features. Her fingers trembled as they hovered over her journal, the pages worn and filled with meticulously penned reflections. Outside the viewport, the rogue planet hung like a dark sentinel, its cold, silent presence a constant reminder of the void that encased them. She closed her eyes briefly, forcing herself to breathe evenly, to suppress the rising tide of memories, flashes of her lost crew, their faces blurred but hauntingly vivid. The guilt was a persistent ghost, whispering accusations in the silence. She had promised to protect her team. Yet this mission, this forsaken station, was unraveling them all. Down in the engineering bay, Jack Simmons worked feverishly. His fingers darted across the console with practiced ease, but his eyes betrayed a restless energy. The flickering lights and erratic readings on the monitors mirrored the chaos growing inside him. He wiped sweat from his brow, his usual smirk replaced by a tense set to his jaw. Suddenly, a sharp spark leapt from an exposed panel, followed by a harsh hiss as a valve ruptured. Steam hissed violently, fogging the room and triggering an alarm that shattered the fragile quiet.
Jax!
Step back! Lena Ortega's voice cut through the clamor as she and Sergei Volkov rushed to the scene. Sergei's broad frame moved with purpose, his stern expression hardening as he assessed the damage. The crew scrambled to contain the breach, the danger dragging their fractured minds into sharp focus. The incident was a brutal reminder. The station was not just breaking down physically, it was breaking them. Elsewhere, Malik Arman sat at a flickering terminal, analyzing the mounting data on the crew's mental health. His usually calm, scientific demeanor faltered as subtle hallucinations danced at the periphery of his vision. He rubbed his temples, forcing himself to concentrate. The numbers painted a grim picture: elevated stress markers, irregular neural patterns, and symptoms consistent with early psychosis. Yet beyond the clinical data lay an intangible dread and empathy that gnawed at him, blurring the line between detached observer and participant in the crew's descent. The corridors echoed with restless footsteps and nervous chatter as the crew convened to debrief. Frustrated voices overlapped, tension crackling like static. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, seeming to breathe with a life of their own. Captain Voss stood at the center, her voice steady but firm. "We cannot afford to fracture now," she commanded. "We are stronger together." Yet beneath her words simmered unspoken fears and doubts. The station's influence was eroding their trust, sowing seeds of paranoia and mistrust. Each member wrestled with their own demons, visions that flickered and faded, memories twisted by the psychic field that enveloped them. The line between reality and hallucination blurred, threatening to dissolve entirely. In the aftermath of the breach, the crew found themselves forced into an uneasy truce. Jax, chastened but unbroken, acknowledged his recklessness. Malik doubled down on his efforts to monitor and support the crew's mental health, seeking ways to shield them from the station's corrosive silence. Lena's steady presence became a beacon of calm, while Sergei's protective instincts sharpened, guarding not just their bodies but the fragile cohesion of the team. But as the station's shadows deepened, so too did the creeping dread. The silence was no longer just an absence of sound, it was a presence, a consuming void that threatened to swallow them whole. And as the crew faced the fracturing of their minds, they understood that survival would demand more than skill or strategy. It would require confronting the darkness within themselves and each other before the station claimed them all. Captain Voss lingered in her quarters long after the meeting dispersed, the weight of leadership pressing down. She opened her journal once more, the pen poised to capture the truth she dared not speak aloud. The silence outside was absolute, and she knew their battle was only beginning. The station whispered around them, shadows flickering just beyond sight. The fracture lines within the crew's minds grew ever wider, threatening to break the fragile bonds holding them together. And in the heart of the silent orbit, the invisible enemy watched and waited. "We have to hold on," Elena whispered to the emptiness. "For all our sakes." The void responded with cold indifference. The crew moved cautiously through the narrowing corridors, their boots echoing softly against the metallic floors of the derelict station. Each step seemed to amplify the oppressive silence that enveloped them like a shroud. Captain Elena Voss led the way, her eyes sharp and alert beneath the dim glow of her helmet's visor. The central hub lay just ahead the heart of the station, where the answers to the strange phenomena might finally be revealed. As they entered the hub, the air grew colder, carrying a faint metallic scent tinged with stale ozone. Emergency lights flickered sporadically, casting long, jittering shadows that danced across walls lined with aged consoles and tangled cables. The hum of dormant machinery stirred faintly beneath the surface, a low vibration that seemed to resonate within their bones. "Keep your eyes open," Voss cautioned, her voice steady despite the tension that clung to the room. "This is where it all went wrong." Malik Arman stepped forward, eyes narrowing behind his wire-rimmed glasses as he activated his handheld scanner. The device beeped softly, picking up faint electromagnetic pulses from the consoles scattered about. He knelt beside a cracked terminal, brushing away a layer of dust to reveal cryptic symbols etched into the metal. These logs. They were fragmented, Malik murmured, fingers flying over the holographic interface as he attempted to stabilize the data stream. But they mention an experiment, something about harnessing energy from the rogue planet's unique field. Jack Simmons, hovering nearby, tapped rapidly on a nearby control panel. "Systems are glitching on and off," he said, frustration evident as a console flickered to life, displaying indecipherable readouts before plunging back into darkness. "Feels like the station's waking up, but it's unstable." Voss exchanged a glance with Lena Ortega, who stood at the periphery, her arms crossed as she monitored the crew's shifting moods. Lena's calm presence was a balm against the rising unease gnawing at the edges of their resolve. "We need to stay focused," Lena said quietly. "Whatever this place is doing, it's affecting us all. We can't let fear break us apart." Sergei Volkov, ever the sentinel, tightened his grip on his rifle, his eyes scanning the darkened corners of the hub. "I don't like it," he grunted. "This place feels wrong. We need to lock down and watch each other's backs." The tension between Lena's steady empathy and Sergei's protective vigilance simmered beneath the surface, a microcosm of the crew's fracturing unity. Malik's fingers paused over the console, his breath catching as a sudden surge of power flickered through the room. Lights blinked erratically, the station systems awakening momentarily from their slumber. A low-frequency hum filled the air, resonating deep within the hull, vibrating through the floor beneath their feet. "It's the psychic field," Malik whispered, voice barely audible. "The experiment must have created some kind of energy envelope. It's alive, somehow." The idea sent a chill through the crew. This was no mere malfunctioning station. It was a living, breathing entity of cosmic dread, an invisible force that wrapped around them like a web, threading through their minds and the very structure of the station. Voss swallowed hard, the weight of command pressing down. "We need to understand it, and fast. If this field is still active, it could consume us all." Jax glanced over his shoulder, eyes wide. "Feels like it's already trying. I keep seeing shadows move when there's no light, hearing whispers where there's nothing to hear." The crew exchanged uneasy looks. The station was no longer just a place to salvage. It was a battleground for their sanity. Lina stepped forward, her voice steady. "We'll get through this together. But we have to keep communication open. No secrets, no hiding fears." Sergei grunted again, eyes narrowing. "Fine. But I'm watching everyone, especially if something's messing with our heads." The central hub's ancient consoles hummed faintly, the flickers of light and bursts of static on the screens painting a fractured picture of a doomed experiment. The logs Malik had uncovered hinted at desperation, scientists pushing boundaries, their hopes pinned on the rogue planet's mysterious energies. But something had gone catastrophically wrong. As the crew delved deeper into the data, a pattern emerged. The station had become a psychic trap, its systems entwined with the consciousness of the original crew, who had vanished without a trace. The field was not just a force of nature, it was an echo of human fear and loneliness, amplified and twisted by cosmic isolation. Voss felt the weight of that truth settle like a stone in her gut. "This isn't just a salvage mission anymore," she said quietly. "We were here to stop a nightmare." Outside the station's reinforced windows, the rogue planet hung in the black void, a silent sentinel orbiting a graveyard of dreams. Within the heart of the station, the crew braced themselves against the growing psychic storm, the pulsing silence that threatened to consume them all. As they prepared to move to the next phase of their mission, Voss paused, her fingers tightening around her comm unit. "Stay sharp. The real test starts now." And in the shadows between the flickering lights, something stirred, a shifting echo, watching, waiting. The heart of the station beat on, silent and relentless, drawing them deeper into its cold embrace. The corridors of the derelict space station seemed to breathe with a life of their own, shadows stretching and twisting as the flickering lights struggled to hold their feeble glow. Captain Elena Voss stood at the threshold of the central hub, her sharp eyes scanning the dim expanse. The silence was no longer empty. It carried whispers soft, elusive, and deeply unsettling. The air felt thick, as if the station itself exhaled a breath of cosmic desolation. Jack Simmons, usually the irreverent spark of the crew, sat hunched over a console in the engineering bay, his fingers trembling slightly as he tried to hack into the station's failing systems. His sandy hair was disheveled, and the perpetual smirk that once diffused tension was gone. At the edge of his vision, shadows flickered, human shapes that vanished whenever he turned to face them. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus on the task. "It's just tricks of the light," he muttered to himself, but the quiver in his voice betrayed him. Meanwhile, Justa Malek Arman worked meticulously in the central hub. His wire-rimmed glasses reflected the glow of multiple monitors displaying erratic data streams. He had set up an array of sensors and emitters, hoping to capture and analyze the psychic phenomena enveloping the station. Minutes ticked by with mounting tension. Suddenly, the equipment registered an anomalous signal, a pulse, rhythmic yet alien. Malik's eyebrows knitted in concentration as he attempted to send a series of modulated tones into the void. A scientific olive branch extended to the unknown. Captain Malik called over the comm link, voice steady but laced with unease. "There's a response pattern. It's communicating, but not in any language I recognize. The energy signatures are fluctuating with emotion. Perhaps." Elena's expression hardened. "Keep trying, Malik. We need to understand what we're dealing with." Lina Ortega, ever the emotional anchor, moved quietly through the corridors, her warm brown eyes alert for signs of distress among the crew. Her steady presence was a balm against the rising paranoia that threatened to fracture their fragile cohesion. Sergei Volkov shadowed her steps, his broad shoulders tense and ready, though his gruff demeanor masked a growing uncertainty. Their contrasting approaches her empathy, and his caution sparked quiet disagreements, but both knew the stakes were too high for division. The manifestations grew bolder. In the observation lounge, shadows coalesced into flickering silhouettes reminiscent of human forms, their edges blurred and wavering like smoke caught in a draft. Whispers echoed through the empty halls, fragments of conversations, laughter, and cries long past. Crew members found themselves questioning their own senses, caught in a liminal space between reality and illusion. Jax's laughter had all but vanished. Alone in the engineering bay, he spoke to the shadows as if they might answer, the bravado stripped away to reveal a raw vulnerability. "You're not real," he insisted, voice cracking. "You can't be real." But the shadows lingered, their silent presence a reminder of the station's dark secrets. Captain Voss called an emergency meeting in the control room. The crew gathered, faces pale and eyes haunted. The station's failing systems flickered erratically, the oppressive silence now punctuated by the low hum of dying machinery and the distant, ghostly echoes that seemed to reach into their very minds. "We were facing something beyond our understanding," Elena began, her voice steady despite the turmoil clawing at her insides. "This entity, whatever it is, it's not just haunting this station. It's a presence born of loneliness and fear, a reflection of the isolation that has consumed the original crew." Malik stepped forward, his tone measured. "I believe it's trying to communicate. Our scientific methods might yet reveal a way to reach it without provoking hostility. But we have to be cautious." Sergei's voice cut through the room. "We need to secure the station and protect ourselves. This thing is affecting our minds. We can't afford to let fear break us apart." Lina nodded in agreement. "We must stay united. Our strength lies in cohesion." The meeting ended with a fragile truce, but the tension lingered. As the crew dispersed, the shadows seemed to pulse with quiet anticipation, and the whispers grew louder, threading through the silence like a spectral web. That night, Captain Voss found herself unable to sleep. She retreated to her quarters, the dim light of her personal console casting long shadows across the walls. Opening her journal, she wrote, "The station is alive with echoes, memories that refuse to rest. I see their faces in the dark, hear their voices in the silence. We are not alone here, not in body, not in mind. If we are to survive, we must understand the nature of this presence. But at what cost?" Outside, the rogue planet loomed, its surface a swirling tempest of cold and shadow. The station orbited silently, a fragile bastion in the void, caught between the living and the lost. In the depths of the station, the echo entity stirred, its intangible form weaving through corridors and minds alike. It was no malevolent demon, but a tragic testament to isolation and despair, a cosmic echo of humanity's own fears. As the crew grappled with the creeping dread, one question loomed over them all. Could they reach across the gulf of silence and find a path to understanding, or would they be swallowed whole by the whispers in the dark? The silent orbit held its breath. The station groaned under the weight of failing systems, the artificial gravity flickering uncertainly as vital circuits sparked and died in rapid succession. Alarms wailed briefly before cutting out, swallowed by the eerie silence that had become the station's signature. Captain Elena Voss stood rigid in the center of the command deck, her eyes scanning the erratic readouts on the flickering monitors. The cold blue glow cast long shadows across the room, shadows that seemed to twitch and shift at the corners of her vision. "Power grid failure in multiple sectors," Malik reported, his voice steady but strained as he tapped at the console beside her. "If we don't reroute and stabilize soon, life support could be compromised." Voss's jaw tightened. "We don't have a choice. We split up. Jax, you take engineering and work with Mira to isolate the faults and reroute power. Malik, Lina, you handle communications and diagnostics. Sergi, secure the perimeter and assist where needed. I'll coordinate from here and keep watch on the central hub systems." The order was clear, but the cost was immediate. Dividing the crew across the vast, silent station increased their vulnerability. Each step away from the group amplified the oppressive isolation that gnawed at their minds. Jax's boots clanged against metal as he dashed toward the engineering bay, the stale recycled air thick with the scent of scorched wiring and coolant leaks. Sparks sputtered from a damaged console, casting erratic shadows that danced on the walls like specters. His fingers flew over the panel, hacking into locked circuits, while sweat beaded on his brow. The station's psychic field whispered at the edge of his consciousness, manifesting as flickers of movement in the shadows and distant, unintelligible murmurs. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus. Meanwhile, Malik moved with deliberate caution through the twisting corridors, his scientific mind struggling to rationalize the strange phenomena. Walls appeared to pulsate subtly, and the faintest whispers echoed just beyond hearing. He adjusted his glasses and ran a diagnostic scan, hoping to isolate the source of the psychic interference. But the data only deepened the mystery. The field was stronger than anticipated, almost sentient. At the communications hub, Lina and Sergi's tension was palpable. Lina's calm pragmatism clashed with Sergi's gruff caution. "We can't keep shutting down comms every time something goes wrong," Lina said quietly, her voice steady but edged with frustration. "We need to maintain contact, or we lose each other completely." Sergei's eyes narrowed. "And what if the echo is listening? We can't afford to be careless." Their argument was cut short by a sudden tremor that rattled the station's frame, the lights flickering violently before stabilizing. Both exchanged a worried glance. The station was deteriorating faster than they'd hoped. Back on the command deck, Captain Voss retreated to a narrow catwalk overlooking the central hub. She opened her journal, fingers trembling as she traced the worn cover. The silence around her felt suffocating, a tangible force pressing against her thoughts. Memories of her lost crew surfaced, unbidden faces, voices, the final moments before the accident. Guilt twisted in her gut, a relentless companion. She whispered to herself, "Not again, not this time." Her voice was swallowed by the void. As the hours dragged on, the crew's isolation fed the echo entity's influence. Visions flickered at the edge of their senses, shadows coalescing into distorted human forms, whispers unraveling into maddening cacophonies. Malik found his scientific skepticism tested as intuition gnawed at him. Jax's bravado faltered beneath mounting fear. Lena struggled to anchor the crew's fraying nerves. Sergei's protective instincts veered into suspicion. Caught in the fissures within the station and themselves, the salvage crew faced a crucible that threatened to shatter their unity and sanity alike. The critical repairs were not just a battle against failing systems, but a desperate fight to hold on to their humanity in the face of a silence that sought to consume them. And as the station's heartbeat faltered, so too did the fragile hope that had brought them here. The shadows lengthened, and the silence listened. What price would they pay to mend the fractures before the abyss claimed them all? The corridors of the derelict space station stretched endlessly, a labyrinthine maze of cold metal and shadows that seemed to shift and breathe with a life of their own. Captain Elena Voss moved cautiously, her footsteps muffled against the worn floor panels, eyes scanning every flicker of light and whisper of sound. The oppressive silence was not empty, it was filled with anticipation, a thick, suffocating presence that clung to her skin and echoed in her thoughts. She paused beneath a flickering overhead light, the weak illumination casting long, jittering shadows along the walls. From the depths of the station came faint, distorted whispers, fragments of speech that teased the edges of comprehension. Elena's breath came in shallow bursts, visible in the cold air despite the station's life support still struggling to maintain basic conditions. Her hand brushed against the wall, grounding herself in the tangible while the intangible threats pressed in. Elsewhere, Malik Arman sat hunched before a bank of consoles in the science lab, the pale glow of erratic readouts reflecting in his wire-rimmed glasses. The instruments were in chaos, signals fluctuated wildly, systems flickered inexplicably. And the station's environmental monitors showed anomalies that defied logical explanation. Malik's fingers moved over the keyboard with hesitant precision, attempting to parse the data, to find a pattern, a cause. Anything to explain the madness creeping through the station's veins. Yet as he worked, a profound silence descended, a silence so complete it was almost tangible. In that moment, the usual hum of the station faded, leaving only the pounding of Malik's heart and the faint, distant echoes of his own breath. His carefully maintained scientific detachment began to falter, replaced by a gnawing unease that crept into his thoughts. The rational mind struggled against creeping intuition, a sense that something beyond understanding was at work here. Jack Simmons, the crew's engineer and hacker, darted through the maintenance tunnels, his footsteps echoing sharply in the narrow passages. The usual spark of humor that danced in his eyes was absent, replaced by a raw, desperate anxiety. Shadows seemed to flicker at the edge of his vision, shapes that twisted and shifted as if alive, mocking his every step. The weight of isolation pressed down on him, the fear of being left behind clawing at his resolve. "Mun, where is everyone?" Jax muttered under his breath, fingers twitching as if ready to crack a joke to break the tension. But the words died unsaid. He pushed forward, the cold metal walls closing in, his breath ragged. Every creak and whisper of the station felt like a threat, a reminder that they were no longer alone. In the security bay, Sergei Volkov gripped his weapon with white-knuckled intensity. The broad-shouldered ex-soldier was a pillar of strength for the crew, but even he was not immune to the psychological siege. The darkness around him warped and twisted, silhouettes flickering just beyond the reach of his flashlight's beam. His stern expression wavered, a flicker of fear crossing his eyes as the unseen forces toyed with his mind. "Stay sharp," he muttered to himself, voice low and steady despite the growing storm within. His protective instincts battled with the rising paranoia, each shadow a potential threat, each silence a harbinger of doom. Throughout the station, the absence of Lena Ortega's steadying presence was felt keenly. The communications officer, usually the emotional anchor in times of crisis, was unreachable. Without her calm mediation, tensions flared and suspicion gnawed at the edges of the crew's fraying nerves. The Echo entity used this fracture mercilessly, feeding on the isolation to deepen its grip. Captain Voss's internal struggle became a microcosm of the crew's plight. Alone in her quarters, she poured her thoughts into her journal, the act both a balm and a confession. Memories of her lost crew, the guilt she had buried deep, surfaced with brutal clarity. The station's silence whispered accusations, a chorus of unseen voices pressing her to confront the past she had tried to escape. Meanwhile, Malik faced his own crisis of faith in science. The data defied explanation, and the entity's manifestations blurred the line between hallucination and reality. He began to listen to his instincts, a dangerous shift for the rational man, but one born of necessity. The station's psychic field was more than an experiment gone wrong. It was a living trap, a prison of consciousness and cosmic despair. Jax's recklessness became a desperate bid to reconnect, to find the others and reforge the fragile bonds that kept them sane. His humor, once a shield, now shattered to reveal the raw fear beneath the fear of abandonment, of being lost in the silence forever. Each step through the twisted corridors was a battle against the creeping madness. In the heart of the station, the Echo entity's presence grew stronger, its intangible form weaving through shadows and echoes. It was not malevolent in the traditional sense, but a tragic fusion of human loneliness and cosmic dread, a reminder of the vast, uncaring universe. Its assaults were psychological, an invasion of the mind that threatened to consume the crew from within. As the chapter drew to a close, the crew's separation and vulnerability set the stage for an inevitable reckoning. Paranoia thickened the air, fear sharpened every sound, and the silence became a living entity in itself, waiting, watching, ready to claim them all. The question remained, could they overcome the crushing isolation and psychic assault to reunite and face the darkness together, or would each fall prey to the endless, consuming silence? The cold corridors seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if the station itself held its breath, awaiting the answer. The air inside the central hub was thick with a silence that felt almost tactile, pressing against the crew's nerves like a slow, suffocating weight. Captain Elena Voss stood at the edge of the room, her gaze fixed on the flickering consoles that lined the walls. The dim glow of the monitors cast long shadows, dancing like ghostly specters across the cold metal surfaces. Around her, the salvage crew moved with a mixture of purpose and hesitation, each member grappling with the implications of their recent discoveries. Malik Arman sat hunched over a console cluttered with fragmented data logs, his wire-rimmed glasses sliding down the bridge of his nose as he scrolled through lines of corrupted code and cryptic messages left behind by the station's original inhabitants. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of revelation. The experiment, he murmured, voice barely above a whisper, it wasn't just about harvesting energy. They were trying to tap into something deeper, something beyond conventional physics. Elena stepped closer, her sharp eyes narrowing as she peered over Malik's shoulder. Deeper how? Malik hesitated, then pointed to a series of logs detailing the experiment's parameters. They tried to harness the rogue planet's unique energy signature. But instead of just power, they ended up creating a psychic field, a kind of mental prison. The original crew's consciousness didn't disappear. It became entwined with this alien force. A heavy silence settled upon the group. Jack Simmons, leaning against a nearby console, let out a low whistle. So, we were not just dealing with ghosts, we were stuck in a psychic trap. Lena Ortega's eyes flicked between the faces around her, her voice steady yet tinged with concern. This explains the hallucinations, the shifting shadows. The Echo entity isn't just a malevolent force, it's a fusion of human minds and something foreign, lonely, scared, desperate. Sergei Volkov's jaw tightened, his usual gruff demeanor softened by the weight of the moment. So, what's our move? We can't just blast our way out without risking everything. Elena inhaled deeply, the burden of command pressing down on her. We need to understand it, not just fight it. If the echo entity is born from the original crew's fear and isolation, then maybe our approach has to be different, more empathetic. Malik nodded slowly, the scientist in him struggling against the creeping dread that they faced something beyond rational explanation. I'll keep analyzing the psychic readings. Maybe there's a way to communicate, to reach whatever consciousness remains inside. Jax cracked his knuckles, the smirk fading from his face, and I'll keep working on the station's systems. If we can disrupt the field without destroying it outright, maybe we can free them and ourselves. The crew gathered around the central console, their faces illuminated by the pale blue light of the station's failing systems. Outside, the rogue planet loomed large and silent, a dark sentinel in the void. Its presence was a constant reminder of the vast, indifferent cosmos and the fragile human lives caught in its orbit. This station, Elena said quietly, was meant to be a beacon of human ingenuity, but loneliness and fear turned it into a prison. We were not just fighting for survival, we were fighting for the souls trapped here. The weight of that realization settled heavily. The echo entity was no mere antagonist, it was a tragic byproduct of human ambition and cosmic indifference. And as the crew prepared for the confrontation ahead, they understood that their fight was as much about compassion as it was about escape. Malik's fingers danced over the console as he initiated a deep scan of the psychic field, the soft hum of the station's systems filling the room. I'm picking up coherent patterns almost like thoughts. Can you reach them? Elena asked. I'm trying, Malik replied, eyes fixed on the shifting data. If we can establish communication, maybe we can find a way to release the consciousness without destroying it. Jax leaned forward, his hands steady despite the tension. Whatever happens, we have to be ready to act fast. The station's systems won't hold much longer. Outside the viewport, the rogue planet's surface churned with swirling storms, its silence a stark contrast to the turmoil within the station. Elena's gaze locked on the planet's shadowed face, and she felt the crushing isolation that had claimed the original crew creeping into her own mind. We were not alone, she whispered, and now we have to find a way to bring everyone home. As the crew set about their grim task, the station seemed to pulse with a living heartbeat, a rhythmic echo of the minds trapped within. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with voices, memories, and a cosmic dread that stretched beyond the boundaries of human understanding. The battle to free the station and themselves had only just begun. In the dim corridors beyond the central hub, the flickering shadows cast by failing lights seemed to watch the crew's every move. Malik's scientific instruments picked up subtle shifts in the psychic field, patterns that hinted at an intelligence reaching out, probing the crew's minds. It's responding, Malik said cautiously, adjusting the sensitivity of his scanner. Not hostile, just curious, Jax frowned, wiping a smudge of grease from his forehead. Curious or manipulative, doesn't matter if it's messing with our heads, we've got to keep our wits. Lina's voice crackled through the comms, calm and reassuring. Stay focused, we were all counting on each other. Sergei's footsteps echoed behind Elena as she moved toward the communications array. Whatever this entity is, it's a reflection of us, our fears, our loneliness. Elena nodded slowly, and that means we have to face those fears head-on, for their sake and ours. The station's systems hummed with unstable energy, a fragile barrier between the crew and the endless silence outside. As they prepared to confront the echo entity, the line between life and oblivion grew thinner, and the true nature of cosmic dread revealed itself in all its chilling depth. The silent orbit held its breath, and so did they. The central hub of the derelict station was a flickering tableau of malfunctioning lights and sparking consoles, casting long, eerie shadows across the walls and floor. The salvage crew assembled here, their faces tense under the dim glow. Senses heightened by the oppressive quiet that felt less like silence and more like a living entity pressing against their minds. The echo entity was no longer a distant threat. It was here, its presence palpable in the shifting darkness and the distorted echoes of human forms dancing just beyond clear perception. Captain Elena Voss took a deep breath, her sharp eyes scanning the room as the shadows writhed and whispered, voices barely audible but laden with sorrow and menace. "We have one chance," she said, her voice steady despite the palpable dread. "We dismantle the psychic field generators and sever its grip on this station. Then we leave fast." Malik Arman adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, eyes flicking to the readings on his portable scanner. "The field is unstable, but it's fighting back," he warned. "The echo isn't just a ghost. It's a psychic force that's been feeding on the isolation and fear here." Jack Simmons, usually the crew's irreverent source of levity, stood rigid, his tousled sandy hair damp with sweat. "I'm ready to hack it to bits," he muttered, fingers twitching over a cracked datapad. The humor that once diffused tension was gone, replaced by raw determination and an undercurrent of fear. Lena Ortega's calm brown eyes swept over the team. "We stick together, keep communication lines open. Sergei, coordinate security and watch for any surprises." Sergei Vokov's broad frame radiated defensive readiness. "I've got your backs," he grunted, gripping his comms tightly. The first assault came suddenly. A wave of psychic energy surged through the hub, and the shadows around them twisted into grotesque forms, distorted echoes of former crew members, faces contorted in silent screams. The air thickened, and a chorus of whispered regrets and accusations filled their minds. Captain Voss felt the pressure as if the darkness itself sought to crawl inside her head, dredging memories of loss and failure. She staggered back into a side corridor. Clutching the worn leather-bound journal, she carried a repository of her thoughts, fears, and regrets. Flickers of her past crew flashed before her eyes, their faces accusing, pleading. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the void, voice breaking. But she forced herself to breathe, grounding her mind in the present. Her command was not just for survival, it was redemption. Meanwhile, in the central hub, Jax and Malik worked feverishly at a damaged console, their hands trembling as the station systems protested with sparks and groans. The psychic assault distorted their senses, making it difficult to distinguish reality from hallucination. Jax's smirk was gone, replaced by a grim line as he hacked through corrupted files, Malik's scientific detachment giving way to desperate intuition. "Almost there," Malik muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. "If we can override the field generators, the entity's hold will weaken." Outside the hub, Lena and Sergei coordinated the crew's movements through crackling comms. Lena's voice was a steady beacon amidst the chaos, her empathy anchoring the team's frayed nerves. Sergei's protective stance ensured their physical safety, though the growing paranoia tested even his discipline. The station groaned ominously, metal twisting and creaking as the rogue planet's gravity pulled it closer. Time was running out. Back in the corridor, Captain Voss made a critical choice. Knowing the entity would target her strongest link to the crew, she volunteered to stay behind and manually maintain the override sequence, buying precious minutes. "You have to go," she urged, voice firm despite the tremor beneath. "I'll hold it as long as I can." Malik hesitated, eyes searching hers. "Elena, you can't just sacrifice yourself. I have to," she said, steeling herself. "For all of you. For the crew I lost before, and the one I'm trying to save now." With a final nod, the crew retreated, their footsteps echoing down the twisting corridors as Captain Voss remained, a solitary figure against the encroaching darkness. The psychic field generators sputtered and died, the oppressive silence lifting just as the station began its fatal descent toward the rogue planet. The crew's escape pods launched into the void, carrying them away from the dying station and the echoing silence within. Yet even in flight, the weight of what they had faced lingered, a cosmic dread that would haunt their dreams and memories. a reminder of the fragile boundary between life and oblivion. As the station vanished into the planet's shadow, Captain Voss's sacrifice became a beacon of hope amidst the vast, cold silence of space. A testament to human resilience in the face of incomprehensible cosmic terror. The crew's journey was far from over, but in that moment they had won a fragile victory against the consuming silence of the silent orbit. The space station trembled violently, its skeletal frame groaning under the relentless pull of the rogue planet's gravity. Flickering lights cast long, erratic shadows down the narrow corridors, and the persistent blare of alarms shattered the suffocating silence that had haunted them since arrival. Captain Elena Voss moved swiftly, her boots echoing against metal flooring as she rallied her crew. "We don't have much time. Systems are failing across the board. Everyone, to your stations!" she commanded, voice steady despite the chaos. Jack Simmons darted ahead, fingers dancing over his portable console as he hacked into the failing control nodes, coaxing life from dying circuits. "The escape pods are still operational, but barely," he reported breathlessly, eyes darting to the readouts that flickered with instability. Malik Arman stood nearby, clipboard in hand, monitoring biometric data from the crew. "We're running on borrowed time. The psychic field's interference is wreaking havoc on the systems and our minds," he muttered, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "We need to get out before the station breaks apart," Lena Ortega said calmly, her voice a steadying force amid the mounting panic. She coordinated comms, ensuring the crew remained connected. Sergei Volkov, ever the vigilant security chief, was already securing passageways and ensuring no one lingered in harm's way. Despite their usual friction, Lena and Sergei exchanged a brief nod. It was a silent acknowledgement of their shared goal, survival. As the crew moved with purpose, the station shuddered violently. A metallic screech reverberated through the hull, and a cascade of sparks showered from a ruptured conduit. Elena's gaze hardened. "I'll stabilize the core systems manually. It's the only way to slow the descent and buy you time." "You can't be serious," Malik protested, his voice edged with concern. "There's no choice," she replied, jaw clenched. "Go. Get the others out." Reluctantly, the crew split, rushing toward the escape pods. Elena made her way to the core control room, the familiar hum of machinery a stark contrast to the chaos beyond. Sweat beaded on her brow as she expertly manipulated the controls, overriding failing protocols and rerouting power through secondary systems. The psychic field's oppressive silence pressed against her mind, threatening to unravel her resolve, but she anchored herself in purpose. "Captain, we're ready to launch," Jax's voice crackled over the comms. "Hold position," she instructed, fingers flying over the panel. "Just a few more minutes." Outside the control room, Lena and Sergei shepherded the remaining crew toward the pods, their combined leadership bridging emotional and physical divides. Lena's calm reassurances tempered Sergei's cautious commands, forging a fragile unity that strengthened the group's resolve. Jax glanced back at the trembling station as he initiated the launch sequence. Pod doors opening. Brace for emergency ejection. The escape pod jolted violently as it separated from the station's collapsing frame. Malik exhaled deeply, eyes scanning the viewport as the station's twisted silhouette receded into the void, engulfed by the rogue planet's pull. A heavy silence filled the pod, broken only by the steady beep of life support systems. Lena's voice, soft but resolute, cut through the quiet. "Elena made a choice that saved us all. We carry her with us." Jax nodded, swallowing hard. "She was the heart of this crew. We have to survive for her." Malik's gaze drifted to the infinite black beyond the pod's window. The silence, it's not empty anymore. It's a reminder of sacrifice, of what it means to be human in the face of the cosmic unknown. As the pod sped toward safety, the survivors grappled with the enormity of their loss and the fragility of their existence. The station, the silent orbit, had claimed its due, but its echoes would linger, etched indelibly into their minds and souls. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with psychological shadows and cosmic dread. Yet within that uncertainty flickered a fragile hope, born from sacrifice and the unyielding will to endure. The boundary between life and oblivion remained perilously thin, but for now they had crossed it together. The silence outside was vast and unending, but inside the pod, amidst the trembling hearts and haunted eyes, life stubbornly persisted. And somewhere deep within that silence, the echo of a leader's courage resounded still. "Captain, status report." Elena's voice broke through the static as the pod stabilized its course. Elena's journal entry flickered in Malik's mind, a final testament to leadership tempered by vulnerability. In the vast silence, we find ourselves. In sacrifice, we find meaning. Hold fast, for the void is patient, but so are we. The survivors settled into the uneasy quiet of space, their minds racing with memories and fears, yet bound by a shared determination to face whatever came next. The rogue planet and its silent orbit receded behind them, but the cosmic dread, the emptiness, and the lingering presence of the echo entity were never far away. The alarms shrieked like banshees through the hollow halls of the derelict station, a desperate cacophony against the backdrop of an oppressive silence that had long settled like dust. The once meticulous lighting system faltered, casting the corridors into a stuttering twilight, shadows stretching and retreating with each flicker. The station groaned under the immense gravitational pull of the rogue planet, its structure trembling with each heartbeat of the cosmic giant drawing it closer. Captain Elena Voss moved with a sharp focus that belied the turmoil roiling beneath her composed exterior. Her boots pounded against the metal grating as she led the remaining crew through the maze of passageways. The echo of their hurried steps swallowed by the vast emptiness surrounding them. Every corner held a whisper of the station's tortured past, the ghostly remnants of lives once lived, now consumed by the entity that had twisted reality within these walls. "Status report," Voss commanded, her voice steady but edged with urgency. Lina Ortega's fingers danced over the handheld console, face pale under the harsh emergency lighting. "Escape pods are still functional, but power is dropping fast. We have maybe minutes before the docking clamps fail completely." Sergei Volkov fell into step beside Voss, his broad frame a bulwark against the creeping dread that threatened to overwhelm them all. "Security systems are offline, hull integrity compromised. We were lucky to have made it this far." Jack Simmons, usually the irreverent spark of the group, was uncharacteristically silent, eyes darting nervously as he hacked furiously at a damaged terminal to override the pod release protocols. The weight of their ordeal had stripped away his usual bravado, leaving raw fear exposed beneath. Drupta Malik Arman hovered nearby, clutching a medkit with trembling hands. His scientific mind struggled to process the chaos, the psychic scars left by the echo entity gnawing at his rationality. "We were not just fighting the station's collapse," he murmured, voice tight with tension. "That presence, it's still here, in our minds." Voss nodded grimly. "Then we fight it with everything we have left. Get to the pods. Now." The corridors seemed to constrict around them, the air thick with a suffocating silence that pressed against their eardrums. Shadows flickered at the edges of vision, intangible and mocking. Every step forward was a battle against the creeping madness threatening to unravel their grip on reality. Reaching the escape pod bay, Jax's fingers flew over the control panel one last time. Override complete. Pods releasing in 3, 2, 1. The massive clamps holding the pods disengaged with a grinding clatter, and the capsules began to eject into the void. Voss helped Lena into the nearest pod, then Sergei, Malik, and finally Jax. The hatch sealed with a hiss, and the pod's systems powered up, casting a cold blue glow over their strained faces. As the pod detached, the station behind them shuddered violently, a deep, guttural groan escaping its failing hull. Pieces of debris erupted outward, illuminated briefly against the blackness before being swallowed by the rogue planet's dark embrace. The station fractured, its twisted metal skeleton tumbling into oblivion. The survivors floated in silence, the vast emptiness outside mirrored by the hollow H within. Voss's eyes traced the vanishing outline of the station, a bitter mixture of relief and loss tightening her chest. The silence was deafening, a void filled with unspoken memories, lingering shadows, and the echo of a presence they could neither forget nor fully understand. Malik broke the silence, voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think it's really over?" Jack shook his head slowly, the tension in his jaw betraying his uncertainty. "I don't know, but whatever that thing was, it didn't want to let us go." Lina reached out, placing a steady hand on Voss's arm. "We survived. That has to count for something." Voss met her gaze, gratitude flickering through her fatigue. "Yes, but survival isn't just about escaping death. It's about facing what haunts us afterward." Outside, the rogue planet loomed larger, an indifferent sentinel in the endless dark. The silence of the cosmos stretched before them, infinite, cold, and unyielding. The last light of the station was gone, but its echoes would ripple through their minds forever, as the pod's engines hummed softly, carrying them away from the silent orbit. Voss opened her journal and began to write not just a record of their mission, but a testament to the fragile boundary between life, death, and the abyss beyond. The cosmic dread that had shadowed their journey was not a force to conquer, but a reminder of humanity's smallness in the face of the vast and unknowable. The endless silence awaited, but for now the survivors held fast to the fragile hope flickering like a distant star, a beacon against the dark. The pod drifted farther from the rogue planet's pull, but the weight of the station's fate and the presence they'd encountered clung to them like a second skin. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she closed the journal, the last entry a quiet vow to remember not just the terror and loss, but the strength found in facing the abyss. Malik studied the readings again, searching for any trace of the psychic field's remnants. "It's faint," he said, "but it's there. It will take time, maybe years, for our minds to fully recover." Jax let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "So we're not out of the woods yet." "No," Voss agreed, "but we've taken the first step." Outside the viewport, the stars stretched into infinity, silent witnesses to their ordeal. Somewhere in that vastness, the rogue planet continued its lonely drift, and the shattered station lay lost to the cosmic night. And in the depths of space, silence reigned vast, unyielding, eternal. But in the hearts of the survivors, a fragile light endured, flickering against the dark, a testament to the enduring human spirit amidst the infinite void. The last light had faded, but the story was not over. The return to normal space was anything but a relief. For Captain Elena Voss, the familiar hum of the ship's engines felt like an oppressive choir. A constant reminder of the silence they had left behind, the silence that still echoed in her mind. Alone in her quarters, she opened her worn leather journal, the pages smoothed from years of use and countless entries. Tonight, the words came slowly but with heavy intent. Her pen traced each letter as if exorcising ghosts from her thoughts. "We escaped the station," she wrote, "but the silence follows. It clings to my skin, a cold shroud I cannot shed. The faces of those lost haunt the edges of my vision, and the weight of command presses upon me more fiercely than ever. I wonder if survival is a curse as much as a blessing." Her sharp eyes, usually so resolute, softened with exhaustion and sorrow. The burden of suppressing guilt, the same guilt that had driven her to lead this salvage mission, settled deep in her chest. The memories of her former crew's demise, once distant, now intertwined with the new horrors they had faced. She paused, closing the journal gently and staring out the viewport into the cold infinity beyond. Meanwhile, in the ship's cramped lab, Dedre, Malik Arman sat surrounded by flickering holographic displays. His wire-rimmed glasses reflected the pulsing blue light of data streams, residual energy readings, sensor logs, and psychic field analysis. The sterile environment was a stark contrast to the chaotic enigma they had escaped, yet Malik's mind was far from settled. Carefully, he adjusted the parameters on a simulation attempting to recreate the station's psychic field. The alien cosmic force that had merged with the original crew's consciousness still defied complete understanding. Malik's scientific curiosity warred with a creeping sense of unease. The field's remnants seemed to ripple through reality itself, subtle and persistent. The entity wasn't malevolent in the traditional sense, he murmured to himself, but born of loneliness and fear, echoes of human isolation amplified beyond comprehension. His fingers danced over the console, cataloging anomalies and theorizing potential containment methods. Yet with each discovery, the vastness of the unknown seemed to deepen, a cosmic riddle without a clear solution. Elsewhere, Jack Simmons sat quietly, an unfamiliar stillness settling over him. The tousled sandy hair that often fell in chaotic waves over his face now framed eyes clouded with thought. The perpetual smirk that had once masked his anxieties was absent, replaced by a pensive silence. He gazed out at the star-speckled void, the endless blackness mirroring the turmoil within. The mission had changed him. No longer the reckless youth eager to prove himself, Jax wrestled with the weight of loss and the burden of survival. The echoes of the station's silence haunted his dreams, whispers of shadows, flickers of lost souls. Redemption felt distant, yet tantalizingly possible. Maybe we can find a way back, he thought quietly, not just from space, but from the darkness inside. In the ship's communal area, Lina Ortega and Sergei Volkov shared a rare moment of calm. Lena's warm brown eyes, usually steady and reassuring, shimmered with empathy as she regarded Sergei. The gruff security chief's normally stern expression softened under her gaze, revealing a vulnerability seldom seen. "We made it," Lena said softly, "but at what cost?" Sergei exhaled slowly, his broad shoulders relaxing just enough to betray the tension beneath. "We'll carry the scars," he replied, "but we're still here. And as long as we stand together, maybe there's hope." Outside, distant stars twinkled coldly, indifferent witnesses to the fragile human bonds forged in cosmic dread. The vast loneliness of space still loomed, an ever-present reminder of humanity's insignificance. The survivors' journey was far from over. The psychic field's remnants pulsed faintly through their equipment and minds, haunting them with lingering shadows. Captain Voss's journal grew thicker with each passing night, a testament to her struggle to reconcile leadership with vulnerability. Malik's scientific pursuit edged into obsession, the boundary between inquiry and madness blurring. Jax's quiet resolve marked the beginning of a new path, one of redemption and self-discovery. Yet, despite their efforts, the silence endured. It whispered in the corners of their minds, a relentless echo of the void they had escaped, but could never truly leave behind. The cosmic dread that had consumed the derelict station had followed them home, a haunting reminder that some silences are not empty, they are filled with the weight of infinite unknowns. As the ship sailed through the endless black, Captain Voss's final journal entry for the night lingered like a whispered prayer. "We survived. But at the edge of all things, survival is only the beginning." And with that, the endless silence stretched on, vast and unyielding, a silent witness to the fragile persistence of life amidst the stars. The cold hum of the ship's revival systems was faint now, barely perceptible beneath the weight of silence that had settled over the survivors. Though far from the derelict station, the psychic field's residue clung to them like a shadow, weaving threads of unease in the quiet moments between their restless breaths. Captain Elena Voss sat in the dim light of the makeshift common area, her posture rigid but her eyes wary. The silence was not peaceful. It was a pressing void, a reminder that the horrors they had escaped were not fully behind them. Lina Ortega moved among the crew, her steady presence a balm to frayed nerves. She knelt beside Tessa, one of the younger technicians, who trembled with a cold sweat, eyes wild from nightmares that refused to release their grip. "It's just the mind playing tricks," Lina murmured softly, brushing a damp strand of hair from Tessa's face. "We're safe here. You're not alone." The words were repeated daily, a mantra to fend off the creeping paranoia that gnawed at them all. Yet for all Lina's efforts, The shadows in their minds lurked, just out of reach, whispering doubts and fears that even the brightest light could not dispel. Sergei Volkov was less convinced. His broad frame cut a formidable figure as he paced the perimeter of their encampment, eyes scanning the darkness beyond their temporary refuge. Every rustle, every flicker of movement set his senses on edge. To him, the threat was not just spectral or psychological. It was tangible, lurking in the corners where light dared not linger. "We can't let our guard down," he muttered under his breath, fingers tightening around the grip of his sidearm. "Whatever's out there, it's still watching, waiting." His vigilance was both a shield and a source of tension. Some of the crew found solace in his protective alertness. Others saw it as a barrier, a wall that kept them isolated from one another. Lina often found herself mediating these frictions, trying to hold the team together as the invisible pressure mounted. Meanwhile, Captain Voss retreated often to the observation deck, seeking solace in the endless expanse of stars. But the cosmos offered no comfort. Each pinprick of light was a reminder of the vast, indifferent void, a silence that swallowed sound and hope alike. She stared out, haunted by flickers of memory, the faces of her lost crew, the echoing corridors of the station, and the intangible presence that had almost claimed them. Her journal lay open beside her, inked pages filled with confessions she dared not speak aloud. Guilt gnawed at her, a constant companion that neither time nor distance could soothe. She was a leader, yes, but also a survivor burdened by the weight of lives she couldn't save. In the shadows of the common area, Jack Simmons wrestled with his own demons. The usual smirk that masked his anxiety was absent. His fingers trembled as he tinkered with a malfunctioning comm device, desperate to find control in a situation that defied logic. Every glitch, every unexpected feedback loop felt like a personal affront, a manifestation of the chaos clawing at his mind. "You okay?" Malik's voice was gentle, but there was a hint of concern beneath his scientific detachment. Jax forced a grin, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, just can't shake the feeling someone's watching." Malik nodded knowingly. The psychic field's influence was subtle, insidious. It had seeped into their minds, whispering doubts, twisting perceptions. His own skepticism was challenged daily by phenomena he couldn't explain, and though he clung to logic, even he felt the tendrils of fear. "We need to rely on each other," Malik said. "Isolation only feeds the shadows." The crew's fragile cohesion was their greatest defense against the encroaching dread. Lina's steadying presence, Sergei's protective watch, Malik's calm reasoning, Jax's technical resourcefulness, and Voss's determined leadership formed a tenuous web of support. But cracks were forming, whispered suspicions, unexplained disappearances of personal items, fleeting glimpses of movement in empty halls. One evening, as the artificial gravity hummed softly, Lina gathered the crew for a meeting. The room was small, lit by amber emergency lights that cast long shadows on the walls. "We all feel it," Lina began, voice firm but kind. "The weight of what we've been through isn't just physical, it's in our minds. But we won't let it break us. We have to stay connected, keep talking, keep trusting." Sergei's jaw tightened, but he nodded reluctantly. "We'll watch each other's backs. No one gets left behind." Captain Voss added, "This silence we escaped, it's still here, inside us. But it doesn't have to be the end. We fight it together." The words were a fragile beacon in the darkness, but as the meeting broke, the heavy silence returned. Each member retreated to their quarters, haunted by dreams of the station's empty corridors and the echoing presence that had almost consumed them. That night, Voss awoke trembling, shadows crawling along her walls as distant whispers echoed in her mind. She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying her breath, reminding herself that she was still alive, still fighting. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, indifferent witnesses to the fragile flicker of human resolve. The psychic field's legacy was not yet ended. The shadows in their minds whispered still, promising that the silence was never truly gone. But neither was hope. The crew faced a new battle, one that would test the limits of their sanity and the strength of their bonds. As the fragile line between reality and nightmare blurred, they had to ask themselves, could they survive the shadows in their minds, or would the silence claim them at last? And in the depths of night, as the void listened silently, the question lingered unanswered. The residual effects of the station's psychic field had begun to manifest with alarming subtlety, threading their way into every aspect of the survivors' fragile new reality. Malik Arman sat hunched over a flickering console in the ship's dimly lit common area, his keen eyes scanning the fluctuating data streams with a mounting sense of unease. Despite their physical escape from the derelict station, the lingering presence had not relinquished its grip. "The instruments keep glitching," Malik muttered, voice low but urgent. "It's like the energy field is still interacting with our equipment, disrupting the electromagnetic systems in ways I can't fully quantify yet." Elena Voss stood nearby, her arms crossed tightly, shadows deepening the sharp angles of her face. She nodded slowly, her gaze distant. "It's not just the tech. I feel it too, that silence, it's clawing at my mind again, like the station's still here, pressing in on me." Malik looked up, concern etching deeper lines across his forehead. "This residual energy, it's more than just a faint echo. It's affecting us, our minds. The psychic field we thought was confined to the station seems to have followed us." Jack Simmons entered the room, running a hand through his tousled sandy hair, his usual smirk replaced by a tight-lipped expression. "My systems keep failing, even the backups. It's like something's jamming the whole ship. And I swear, the shadows in the corridors, sometimes I catch them moving against the light." Lina Ortega appeared behind him, her steady brown eyes reflecting the glow of the monitors. "We're not alone in this. The silence isn't just a void. It's a presence." The crew gathered in the cramped engineering bay, the hum of the ship's systems a fragile barrier against the encroaching void. Jax and Lina exchanged worried glances as flickering lights and unexpected power surges punctuated the tension. "If the psychic field's energy is permeating this ship," Malik speculated, "then we need to find a way to shield ourselves or dissipate it. Otherwise, we risk losing our grip on reality entirely." Sergei Vokov's voice crackled over the comms, steady but laced with urgency. "I'm on patrol around the docking bay. Shadows are twisting near the windows again, and there's this faint whispering like the station's voice, just out of reach. It's messing with my head." Elena's jaw tightened. "We thought leaving the station meant leaving the nightmare behind. But it seems the nightmare followed us into the void." Later, in the solitude of her quarters, Elena stared out into the infinite blackness where the rogue planet had once hung like a silent sentinel. The void seemed to pulse with a quiet malevolence, a darkness that seeped into her bones. She clutched her personal journal tightly, the pages a lifeline to her fading sanity. The silence whispered old fears, memories of lost crews and failed missions, the weight of guilt pressing down like a physical force. She fought to keep the darkness at bay, but the station's lingering presence gnawed relentlessly at her resolve. Meanwhile, Malik worked tirelessly, running experiments and calibrating sensors to understand the residual energy. His scientific mind wrestled with the impossible, a psychic imprint so powerful it defied conventional physics yet left tangible effects in their reality. "It's a lingering consciousness," Malik concluded during a tense briefing. "A psychic echo that hasn't dissipated, infecting our environment and minds. We're not just dealing with external threats, this is internal, a battle within our own perceptions." The crew listened, the weight of cosmic dread settling over them like a shroud. Each member grappled with their own fears and the creeping influence of the silence that stalked their thoughts. Jax, normally the irrepressible joker, found his humor faltering as shadows flickered at the edges of his vision. Lena's calm presence became a vital anchor, her steady voice cutting through the growing paranoia. Sergei's protective vigilance intensified, but even his hardened exterior showed cracks under the relentless pressure. The lingering presence was not simply a remnant of the station, it was a force, a cosmic echo refusing to be silenced. The survivors faced a new ordeal, surviving not only the physical dangers of space, but the relentless psychic siege that threatened to consume them from within. As the chapter closed, the silence deepened, wrapping around their minds like a suffocating fog. The question hung heavy in the recycled air. How long could they resist before becoming part of the endless, devouring void? The haunting pull of the silent orbit was far from over. The relentless silence of space had once again taken hold, but within the cramped confines of the survivors' temporary quarters aboard their shuttle, silence was anything but peaceful. Jack Simmons prowled the narrow corridor like a caged animal, his sandy hair tousled and eyes darting at every flicker of shadow. The dull hum of failing life support systems was the only soundtrack as he wrestled with the suffocating emptiness that gnawed at his resolve. "You're not helping," Lina Ortega said softly, her voice barely above a whisper as she watched him from the corner of the room. "We need calm, not chaos." Jax turned sharply, his usual smirk faltering under the weight of exhaustion and fear. "Calm? Do you think I'm calm? You think any of us are?" His words came out sharper than intended, but the truth was unavoidable. The silence burrowed deep into their minds, twisting thoughts and blurring the edges of reality. Nearby, Juta Malik Arman sat hunched over a cracked tablet, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the sparse light as he scrolled through erratic biometric readings. His calm, analytical demeanor was a fragile veneer over a growing unease that no data could explain. Each spike and drop in heart rate, each unexplained neural fluctuation defied logic, mocking his scientific certainties. "The readings are inconsistent," Malik murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "It's as if the station's psychic field isn't just affecting the environment, but us, our minds, our perceptions." Lena's gaze shifted to Malik, concern etched in her warm brown eyes. "So, what do we do? How do we fight something we can't see or measure?" Before Malik could answer, the tension in the galley escalated abruptly. Sergei Volkov's broad frame filled the cramped space as he confronted Lina, his voice low but edged with frustration. "We protect this crew with strength and vigilance, Lina. Emotional support only goes so far when survival is at stake." Lina met his stern expression with equal resolve. "And pushing people away, bottling up fear and doubt that keeps us safe. We're falling apart because we're not addressing what's inside us. You can't shoot a nightmare." Their exchange crackled with raw emotion, a clash of two survival philosophies forged in fire. Sergei's hardened military pragmatism against Lena's steady empathy. Captain Elena Voss observed the confrontation from a distance, her silhouette framed against the viewport's vast expanse. The rogue planet's cold, swirling darkness stretched endlessly beyond, mirroring the void inside her mind. Her reflection flickered alongside distant stars, a stark reminder of the fragile boundary she walked between control and chaos. Her journal lay open beside her, pages filled with terse notes and candid reflections on leadership and loss. The ghost of her previous crew's fate lingered in every line, a silent companion to the crew's current unraveling. "We're at a crossroads," Elena whispered, voice barely audible over the shuttle's hum, "between what's real and what our minds conjure to survive this silence." Back in the common area, Jax's pacing slowed, the restless energy draining as exhaustion claimed him. Yet beneath his outward defiance, a deeper fear took root, the terror of being forgotten, of losing himself to the void that had already swallowed so many before. Malik closed his tablet with a sigh, the scientist's certainty giving way to the unsettling truth that logic and reason might not be enough. "We have to trust each other," he said quietly, meeting Lina's eyes, "or we won't stand a chance." Their fragile alliance, forged in the crucible of cosmic dread, was the only tether left to reality. But as the station's psychic influence tightened its grip, the survivors knew the path ahead would demand sacrifices of certainty, of control, and perhaps of themselves. The silence outside pressed closer, a living entity weaving shadows and whispers into the fabric of their minds. At this crossroads of reality, the survivors faced an impossible choice: cling to the fragments of their sanity or surrender to the consuming darkness that awaited beyond the fragile veil. And in the depths of that silence, the echo entity watched, waiting for the final fracture to claim them all. As Jax's restless steps echoed faintly against the metal floor, the question lingered in the air: how much of what they saw, heard, and felt was truly real? Or were they already lost, drifting in a silent orbit between existence and oblivion? The fragile line blurred further with every passing moment, and the next step would determine whether they found their way back or vanished into the endless silence forever. Captain Elena Voss sat alone in the dimly lit communal area of the derelict space station, the faint hum of failing life support systems the only sound accompanying her. Her fingers trembled slightly as she hovered over her worn journal, the pages filled with scrawled notes and private reflections, yet tonight, the words escaped her. Outside the viewport, the rogue planet hung like a dark sentinel, its silent presence a constant reminder of the void pressing in around them. Long had she kept the memories locked away, the loss of her previous crew, the accident that had shattered her world and left her with a burden of guilt so heavy it threatened to crush her. But here, in this forsaken orbit, confronted by a new horror that preyed on their minds, the past refused to stay buried. The patterns were unmistakable: isolation, creeping madness, and the slow unraveling of hope. Elena's breath hitched as she recalled the faces of those she had failed, their voices whispering through the corridors of her mind. A soft knock interrupted her solitude. Juta Malik Arman entered quietly, his eyes reflecting concern beneath the wire-rimmed glasses that seemed perpetually perched on his nose. "Captain," he said gently, "you've been withdrawn lately. This silence, it's affecting everyone. Maybe sharing it could help." Elena met his gaze, the vulnerability in her eyes surprising even herself. "I've carried this weight alone for too long, Malik. Maybe it's time it wasn't just mine anymore." Malik nodded, pulling up a chair beside her. Slowly, other crew members, drawn by the rare shift in atmosphere, gathered nearby. Lena Ortega's warm brown eyes offered silent encouragement, while Sergei Volkov's stern expression softened just enough to signal cautious support. Jack Simmons lingered on the edge, his usual smirk absent, replaced by an unreadable tension. Elena took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice steady but laden with emotion. "I lost my last crew in an accident I couldn't prevent. Their faces haunt me. Every decision I make, I fear repeating that failure. Here, in this silence, I see the same shadows creeping in." The crew listened, the oppressive silence of the station momentarily replaced by the quiet strength of shared pain. Malik broke the stillness next, his voice a blend of science and compassion. "Our minds are fragile, but they are also resilient. By acknowledging our fears, we may weaken the hold this place has on us." Jack shifted uneasily before stepping forward, his voice rough but honest. "I've spent my life running from my family, my past. This mission was supposed to be my chance to prove myself. But I'm terrified I'll lose you all, just like I lost everything else." The confession hung in the air, raw and unvarnished. Lina moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on Jax's shoulder, while Sergei nodded, a silent promise of protection. For the first time since arriving, the crew felt a flicker of unity, a fragile hope amid the dread. The memories of loss and fear no longer isolated them, but bound them together in a shared resolve. As the night deepened and the station's flickering lights cast long shadows, Elena closed her journal, feeling lighter, if only slightly. The reckoning with the past had begun, and with it, the possibility that they might yet survive the silent orbit, and the entity that lurked within. But the darkness outside the viewport remained, an unyielding reminder that the fight was far from over. The cosmic silence awaited, patient and eternal, threatening to consume all who dared to challenge it. And so, with a renewed but fragile determination, the crew prepared to face whatever horrors the void would send next. their hearts beating in cautious synchrony against the vast, indifferent cosmos. The stark silence of space had never felt so oppressive. In the cold confines of their battered ship, the survivors huddled around the glowing console, eyes fixed on the flickering display. The rhythmic pulse that spilled through the comms was unmistakable, an echo from the derelict station they had fled, a signal haunting the void like a ghost refusing to rest. Captain Elena Voss pressed her palms against the cool metal of the viewport, the vast blackness outside stretching infinitely, broken only by the brooding silhouette of the rogue planet. The faint hum of the ship's systems was drowned out by the pounding of her own heart as memories surfaced unbidden, the flickering lights in the station's corridors, the whispering shadows, the faces of her lost crew. The signal's cadence was a siren song, tugging at her resolve, threatening to unravel the fragile barrier she had built around her grief. "It's them," Lena Ortega murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, eyes wide in the dim red glow of the console. "It's the same pattern we heard before. I thought we left it behind." Juta Malik Arman leaned forward, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he scrolled through layers of data. "This isn't just a random transmission. There's structure here, layers within layers. It's almost as if it's trying to communicate." Jack Simmons shifted uneasily, fingers twitching over his controls. "Trying to communicate, or trying to lure us back in." Sergei Volkov stood near the rear hatch, arms crossed, his stern gaze scanning the room. "We don't know what it is. Approaching could be a trap. We should keep our distance." Captain Voss met Sergei's eyes, her voice steady but laced with a fragile edge. "We can't ignore it. This signal, it's tied to the station, to whatever is still there. We need answers." The room fell into a heavy silence, each member wrestling with their own fears and memories. Malik's fingers danced over the holographic interface, isolating frequencies that revealed fragments of distorted voices and static-laden messages. "This reminds me of the original distress calls, but there's something new here. Something layered beneath the static. Could it be the echo entity reaching out?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. "Or a remnant of the psychic field," Malik speculated, eyes narrowing as he processed the data. "Whatever it is, it's persistent. It's not just noise, it's a signal with intent." Jax let out a short, uneasy laugh. "Great. Just what we needed, more ghosts in the machine." Captain Voss's gaze hardened. "We survived the station. We can face this. But we must be cautious." As the ship drifted farther into the black, the signal's pulse grew stronger, weaving through their comms like a spectral thread. Shadows seemed to flicker at the edges of their vision, and the silence was no longer empty but charged with unseen presence. The crew's nerves frayed as memories of isolation and dread crept back, threatening to consume them whole. Malik hesitated, torn between scientific zeal and the instinct to flee. "If we can decode this signal, maybe we can understand the entity, find a way to end this nightmare. But if we were wrong, then we'll all face whatever comes." Captain Voss interrupted, her voice steel beneath the weight of her losses. Together, the decision to investigate rekindled the fragile flame of hope amid the encroaching darkness, but with it came the chilling realization that the void was not empty. Something watched, waited, and pulled relentlessly at the edges of their sanity. The cosmic dread that had haunted the station now clung to them like a second skin, whispering promises of oblivion. As the signal thrummed through the ship's systems, the survivors braced themselves for the unknown. Beyond the rogue planet's silent orbit, the boundary between life and oblivion thinned, and the pull of the void grew ever stronger. The question lingered in the stale, recycled air. Was their pursuit of truth a path to salvation or a descent into eternal silence? The ship's hull groaned softly as it adjusted course, the crew's faces etched with tension and fragile resolve. Somewhere in the darkness, the signal pulsed again, steady, insistent, and hauntingly familiar. The survivors knew the next steps would test every shred of their courage and wits, pulling them deeper into the cosmic nightmare they had tried so desperately to leave behind. In this vast and silent void, the echo of the past was not dead, and the void's pull was merciless. But for Captain Elena Voss and her crew, turning away was no longer an option. The silence awaited their answer, and the stars watched silently, eternal and indifferent. The dim glow of the communications room was a fragile beacon in the vast darkness of the survivors' new reality. Lena Ortega sat hunched over the aged receiver, her fingers deftly adjusting the dials in a practiced rhythm. Static hissed between the frequencies, punctuated by brief, fragmented bursts of sound, faint echoes that reminded her painfully of the ghostly transmissions they had once heard aboard the derelict station. Her breath hitched as a pattern emerged, a signal both familiar and alien, like a whispered secret from the void itself. Captain Elena Voss watched from the viewport, the rogue planet's cold silhouette etched against the starless backdrop. The silence outside was absolute, yet the signal's persistence suggested an unseen presence reaching out, refusing to be contained. The weight of that knowledge pressed on her chest, a silent oppressor rivaling the oppressive emptiness of space. Her mind flickered back to the station, the shifting shadows, the fractured minds of her crew, the echo entity's intangible grasp, and now she realized with a sinking dread that the entity's influence had not been confined. It was spreading. Elena called softly, turning from the viewport. "What are you hearing?" Lena's eyes remained fixed on the receiver, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's the same patterns we detected on the station, distorted, but unmistakable. The psychic field, it's extending outward." Drustam Malik Arman entered the room, carrying a portable data pad glowing with streams of encrypted information. His usual calm was strained, the lines of fatigue etched deeper into his face. "The analysis confirms it," he said, voice taut with disbelief. "The psychic resonance is pulsing beyond the station's confines, interlacing with the rogue planet's unique energy signature." Jack Simmons leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, his usual smirk replaced by a tight line. "So, we're not just dealing with a haunted station anymore," he said darkly. "This thing's got a footprint in normal space." Sergei Volkov stepped forward, his broad frame filling the cramped room. "That means the danger follows us," he said grimly. "We can't just run and hope it stays behind." Elena nodded slowly, the weight of command settling deeper. "We have to understand it, or it will consume us all." "Malik, can you find a way to communicate with it?" Malik hesitated, the scientist in him battling the growing unease within. "I'll try," he said, "but this isn't like any phenomenon we've studied. It's part consciousness, part cosmic force, and it's intertwined with human memories and fears." Hours passed as the survivors worked tirelessly. Malik ran complex simulations, attempting to decode the psychic signals and establish a dialogue. Lina monitored the communications equipment, amplifying and filtering the ethereal transmissions. Jax hacked into external satellite feeds, searching for anomalies that might reveal the entity's reach. Sergei kept watch, his vigilant gaze scanning the shadows. The silence was broken intermittently by the faint crackle of static, the ghostly flicker of systems struggling to stabilize, and whispers that seemed to drift just beyond comprehension. The crew's nerves frayed as the line between reality and the psychic field's influence blurred. At one point, Jax's fingers froze over the keyboard as the monitor flickered. A distorted human face, half-shadowed and shifting, appeared briefly before dissolving into static. The room fell into a heavy silence, the crew exchanging uneasy glances. "It's trying to reach us," Malik said quietly, voice laced with both scientific fascination and fear. "Or perhaps it's warning us." Elena stepped forward, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "We need to be cautious. This entity isn't just a threat, it's a reflection of our own isolation and desperation. We must face it, but not lose ourselves in the process." Lina reached out, placing a hand on Elena's arm. "We're not alone," she said firmly. "We still have each other." But even as those words offered a fragile comfort, the creeping dread lingered, a reminder that the cosmic silence was no longer confined to the station's silent orbit. It had followed them, a shadow cast across their minds, and the vast emptiness beyond. As the survivors prepared for the next phase of their struggle, the question loomed: could they reclaim their echoes and sever the psychic field's reach? Or was the inexorable silence destined to consume them all? The void awaited their answer, indifferent and eternal. Captain Elena Voss sat in the half-lit medbay, the sterile white walls casting pale shadows around her. Her fingers hesitated over the worn leather cover of her journal, the only tangible anchor she had left in this unraveling nightmare. The ship's systems groaned faintly in the background, a persistent reminder of their fragile existence. Outside the viewport, the endless black void stretched, indifferent and silent, a silence that had begun to seep into their minds. She opened the journal carefully, the pages fluttering softly as if disturbed by an unseen breath. Her pen hovered, then began to move, scratching out words that were both confession and commandment. Hold on. Remember who you are. Remember what we've lost. Remember what we must fight for. The act of writing was a battle against the creeping fog in her mind, a desperate attempt to preserve clarity. Each word was a lifeline thrown into the abyss. The silence around her was oppressive, a weight pressing on her chest, threatening to suffocate the last vestiges of reason. Not far away in the engineering bay, Jack Simmons sat slumped before a flickering console. The usual spark in his eyes was dimmed, replaced by a haunted glaze. His fingers twitched nervously, hovering over the controls but unable to focus. Memories, or were they hallucinations? Collided and fractured within him, fragments of a past he barely understood and fears that clawed at his heart. The fear of abandonment had always lurked beneath his wit and bravado, but here in the station's suffocating silence, it grew into a tangible specter. He whispered to himself, a mantra meant to stave off the panic, "I'm not alone. I'm not alone." But the words felt hollow, swallowed by the void. In the cramped science lab, Malik Arman stared intently at a cascade of data streams projected on translucent screens. His brow furrowed as numbers and patterns twisted into anomalies that defied all known physics. The station's psychic field. The echo entity's lingering presence, these were no longer matters of speculation, but undeniable realities, pressing against the boundaries of his scientific understanding. He rubbed his temples, caught between the cold logic of science and the unsettling intuition that whispered of forces beyond comprehension. Malik's skepticism, once a shield, was now a barrier to grasping the full horror of their situation. He muttered under his breath, "There has to be a rational explanation, but what if there isn't?" Across the station, in the communication room, Lina Ortega and Sergei Volkov exchanged a glance fraught with unspoken tension. Lina's warm brown eyes sought calm and connection amidst the chaos, while Sergei's stern expression was etched with the weight of responsibility and caution. Their approaches to survival diverged, her empathy clashing with his pragmatism, but the peril they faced demanded unity. Lina's voice broke the silence, steady yet soft. "We need each other now more than ever. We can't afford to fall apart." Sergei nodded, the lines in his face softening momentarily. "Agreed. We watch each other's backs, no more fractures." Their fragile alliance was a beacon amid the encroaching madness, a testament to the resilience of human connection, even as reality frayed at the edges. Throughout the station, the psychic residue from the failed experiment gnawed at the survivors' minds. Shadows flickered in peripheral vision. Whispers echoed in empty corridors. The boundary between reality and hallucination thinned until it was nearly imperceptible. Memories mingled with illusions, and the survivors found themselves questioning the very nature of their existence. Captain Voss's journal became a sacred tool, a way to tether herself, and by extension, her crew, to some semblance of truth. She read aloud from its pages during moments of shared despair, anchoring the group with her words. Yet even she was not immune to the creeping dread that whispered of oblivion. Jax, struggling against his own demons, reached out more often, seeking connection even as his anxiety threatened to drive him away. Malik, challenged to reconcile science with the inexplicable, began to trust his instincts alongside his data. Lena and Sergei's uneasy cooperation taught the others that survival depended as much on emotional bonds as on physical safety. As the station's systems flickered and the rogue planet loomed ever closer, the survivors stood at a crossroads. Their identities, their perceptions, and their very sanity were fading like echoes in the void. Yet within that darkness, a fragile spark of hope endured, a determination to hold fast, to resist the silence, and to reclaim their reality before it was lost forever. The chapter closed on Captain Voss's final journal entry for the day. The line between what is and what isn't grows thin. But as long as we remember, we exist, we fight, we survive. Outside, the silent orbit held them in its cold embrace, waiting for the next moment when the boundaries would be tested again. End of. The dim glow of the station's emergency lighting cast long shadows across the common area, a muted sanctuary amidst the vast emptiness that stretched beyond the station's hull. Lina Ortega sat cross-legged on the cold metal floor, her voice a soft yet steady anchor in the oppressive silence that so frequently threatened to swallow them whole. Around her, the crew gathered hesitantly, drawn by the promise of something familiar, a momentary reprieve from the creeping dread. "Breathe in slowly," Lena instructed, her warm brown eyes reflecting a quiet resolve. "Hold it for a count of 3 and release. Let the tension go with the breath." The low hum of the station's aging systems filled the spaces between her words, a constant reminder of their isolation. Yet here in this fragile circle of human presence, a tentative calm began to settle. Captain Elena Voss leaned against the far wall, sharp features softened by the rare sight of vulnerability. Her eyes, usually so intense and guarded, flickered with something akin to relief as she watched her crew respond to Lena's steady guidance. Sergei Volkov stood just outside the common area, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the dim corridor lights. His gaze swept the shadows with the practiced vigilance of a seasoned security chief, every muscle taut against the ever-present threat that lurked both within and beyond the station's walls. Yet, as Lena approached him with a warm smile, the rigid lines of his face relaxed just enough to reveal a guarded hopefulness. "How's the perimeter?" Lena asked softly, her voice cutting through the tension like a balm. Holding, Sergei replied gruffly, but not without a hint of gratitude. "Better than last cycle." Their brief exchange carried weight beyond the words, a silent acknowledgement that they were no longer isolated entities, but a team striving to hold the fraying edges of their sanity and safety together. Inside, the crew's dynamic shifted subtly but perceptibly. Malik Arman, ever the skeptic and scientist, sat beside Jack Simmons, whose usual smirk was tempered by fatigue and lingering anxiety. A heated discussion about the station's failing life support systems had threatened to fracture the fragile trust between them just days before. But under Lina's mediation, voices lowered, tempers cooled, and common goals reasserted their place. Captain Voss observed quietly from her usual perch, her suppressed guilt a shadow behind her eyes. Yet, as she listened to the exchange, a faint smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Here, in the midst of cosmic isolation and creeping madness, a spark of something vital endured hope. The station's artificial lights flickered suddenly, a brief, unsettling reminder of the precariousness of their situation. But instead of panic, a ripple of laughter broke through the room. Jax, ever the restless joker, tripped over a loose panel and made a clumsy joke about the station trying to join the cosmic silence permanently. The sound echoed softly in the metal corridors, a momentary defiance of the void's oppressive stillness. In this fleeting moment, the crew remembered what it meant to be human, flawed, fragile, but undeniably alive. Lina's steady presence and Sergei's unwavering watchfulness formed a bridge between emotional fragility and physical resilience. Together, they kindled a fragile flame of unity, a glimmer of hope that might yet withstand the encroaching darkness. Yet, beneath the surface, the threat of the echo entity loomed ever closer, its intangible whispers weaving through the station's walls and into their minds. The psychic field that enveloped the station pulsed with an eerie rhythm, a silent heartbeat that threatened to drown them in madness. Could this fragile hope hold? Could the crew, fractured but not yet broken, find the strength to face the cosmic dread that sought to consume them? As the station drifted silently in its orbit around the rogue planet, the answer remained uncertain, a question hanging in the void, as vast and silent as the cosmos itself. The chapter closes as Lena's voice rises again, guiding the crew through another breathing exercise, the sound a beacon in the endless silence. Outside, the shadows shift once more, and somewhere deep within the station, a distorted echo flickers, a reminder that the fight for their minds and their very souls is far from over. The silent orbit's legacy, the flickering lights of the station's archive room, cast wavering shadows across Captain Elena Voss' face as she leaned over the cracked terminal. Draw. Malik Arman sat beside her, adjusting the settings on a fragile holographic projector that sputtered to life, casting ghostly images of faded logs and fragmented recordings into the stale air. They were surrounded by the detritus of a forgotten crew, personal effects strewn about, fractured data cores blinking feebly, and walls pocked with the scars of time. Outside, the rogue planet drifted silently, a dark sentinel against the starless void. Elena's eyes narrowed as she traced the sequence of events recorded in the logs. The original crew had been conducting a daring experiment, an attempt to harness the unique energy emitted by the rogue planet. Malik's fingers danced over the console, pulling up data on the planetary emissions, low-frequency pulses of an unfamiliar resonance that seemed to ripple through the very fabric of the station. "This energy," Malik murmured, voice steady despite the fatigue lining his features, "it's unlike anything recorded before. It's not just physical radiation. It seems to interact with neural patterns. It's as if the planet's energy can influence consciousness itself." Elena nodded, the weight of the revelation settling heavily upon her. "Which explains the psychic field we've been detecting, the one trapping the original crew's consciousness." They were not alone. Not truly. Jack Simmons emerged from the shadows behind them, his usual smirk subdued. "You guys might want to see this," he said, gesturing to another terminal where Lina Ortega and Sergei Volkov were gathered, deciphering streams of experimental data. The room hummed with a low vibration, the very floor beneath their feet resonating faintly with the rhythmic pulse of the planet's orbit. Lina's brow furrowed as she studied the data. These readings confirm it, the station's systems were designed to channel the planet's energy, creating a psychic field. But something went wrong. The crew's consciousness didn't just get trapped. It merged with something else, something alien. Sergei's jaw tightened. An entity born from loneliness and fear. The group fell silent. The implications were staggering. The Echo entity was not merely a malevolent force, but a tragic byproduct of human ambition and cosmic isolation. It embodied the very dread that had gnawed at their minds, the crushing silence, the emptiness of space, and the loneliness that no technology could bridge. Elena stood abruptly, moving to the viewport platform overlooking the void. The rogue planet loomed large, a dark, motionless orb against the endless black. Its silence was absolute, a void within a void. She pressed a gloved hand to the reinforced glass, feeling the cold seeping through the barrier. "It's like staring into the abyss," she whispered, and realizing the abyss is staring back. Malik joined her, voice soft. The station, the planet, the entity, they are all reflections of isolation. The cosmic dread we feel is mirrored in this place. Her gaze locked on the shadowed planet. We were not just fighting to escape a haunted station. We were confronting the silence that threatens to consume us all. Back in the control room, the team gathered once more, their faces illuminated by the flickering consoles. The air was thick with tension, but beneath it lay a fragile thread of hope. Lena spoke first, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "If the Echo entity is born from loneliness, perhaps it can be reached. not with weapons, but with understanding. Jax nodded slowly. We can't just destroy it. We have to contain it to accept its existence without letting it consume us. Sergei's stern expression softened. It's a dangerous gamble, but maybe it's the only way. Elena's eyes swept over her crew, seeing the exhaustion and fear etched into their features. Yet there was also resolve, a determination born from shared suffering, and the knowledge that they stood at the precipice of something far greater than themselves. Then we prepare, she said firmly. We use what we've learned to confront the entity on our terms, to hold the silence at bay. Outside, the rogue planet's shadow crept closer, a dark tide rising against the fragile light of the station. The silent orbit held its breath waiting, and so did they. The days that followed were a crucible of mind and spirit. The survivors divided their efforts between stabilizing the station's failing systems and delving deeper into the archives, piecing together the final moments of the original crew. Each fragment of data was a step closer to understanding the cosmic loneliness that had birthed the Echo entity. Malik spent long hours running simulations, attempting to model the psychic field and its interaction with the rogue planet's energy. His scientific rigor was tested as phenomena defied explanation: fluctuations in neural readings, inexplicable shifts in the station's atmosphere, and dreams that bled into waking moments. Jax worked feverishly to patch broken circuits and reconfigure the station's interface, hoping to create a feedback loop that might weaken the entity's hold. Lina maintained communications with their ship, though the silence beyond the station remained unbroken, a void that mocked their efforts. Sergei coordinated security, his watchful eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. The psychological toll of the station's oppressive silence was evident in his tightened stance and terse commands. Elena kept a steady hand on the crew, her journal entries revealing the growing weight of leadership mingled with personal torment. Memories of her lost crew surfaced unbidden, their faces merging with the spectral echoes that haunted the station. One evening, as the station's artificial lights dimmed to conserve power, Elena stood once more at the viewport. The rogue planet rotated slowly, its surface an unreadable expanse of shadow and silence. She whispered to the darkness, "We are not so different." A distant murmur seemed to answer, a breath against the void. The legacy of the silent orbit was no longer just a tale of loss and despair. It was a mirror held up to humanity's own fears, and solitude a cosmic reflection of the silence that dwelled within. As the station systems flickered and the night deepened, the survivors braced themselves. The final confrontation loomed, but they faced it with a new understanding that in the vast, silent cosmos, connection was the only light against the abyss. The command hub was cloaked in a dim, flickering gloom, the console lights intermittently casting long, wavering shadows across the cold metal walls. Captain Elena Voss sat alone, her usually steady hands trembling as she pressed the record button on her journal device. Her breath was shallow, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on her chest like the unforgiving vacuum outside. The silence was suffocating, a void so complete it seemed to echo from the deepest reaches of the cosmos itself. "This may be the last entry," she whispered into the recorder, her voice barely more than a breath. "The silence is no longer just around us, it's inside us. I can feel it clawing at the edges of my mind. We stand at a threshold, a place where surrender means losing ourselves and fighting means risking everything. But I will not let the past repeat. We must cross this threshold, no matter the cost." The door hissed open behind her, and Malik Arman stepped inside, his expression grim but resolute. "Elena," he said softly, "the others are gathering, it's time." She nodded, steeling herself. "Then let's face this silence together." In the central chamber, the rest of the crew had assembled. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the dim emergency lighting painting their faces with hues of blue and gray. The hum of failing systems was the only sound, punctuated occasionally by the distant creaks and groans of the aging station. Lina Ortega stood near the communications console, her warm brown eyes scanning the group, offering silent reassurance. Sergei Volkov leaned against a bulkhead, his broad shoulders squared but his jaw tight, an outward shield against the gnawing fear inside. Jack Simmons paced restlessly, his usual smirk absent, replaced by a distant, haunted look that betrayed the turmoil he struggled to suppress. Captain Voss took a deep breath and stepped forward. "We all know why we're here," she began, voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "The Echo entity isn't just some malevolent force. It's a reflection of our own isolation, our fears, and the loneliness that brought this station to ruin. It's trapped us in a psychic field, feeding on our minds. If we do nothing, it will consume us all." Malik stepped forward, voice calm but urgent. "Our only chance is to sever the psychic connection sustaining it. But that means entering the heart of the entity's influence, where reality blurs and our minds are at their most vulnerable. It's a sacrifice we must be prepared to make." A heavy silence fell. Lina's voice broke through, steady and compassionate. "We've all felt the dread, the creeping emptiness. But together we can hold on. We must." Sergei's voice was gruff but unwavering. "I'll protect anyone who falters. No one gets left behind." Jax finally stopped pacing, his eyes locking with Elena's. "I'm ready. No more running from what I'm afraid of." The decision was made, a pact sealed in the dim light of the dying station. As they prepared, the shadows around them began to shift. The air grew heavy, charged with an unnatural energy. Flickering shapes emerged, distorted echoes of human forms twisted by the entity's psychic presence. The Echo entity itself manifested in a chilling display of desperate resistance, its intangible forms swirling like smoke, whispering in voices both familiar and alien. Captain Voss met the entity's gaze without faltering. "We end this now," she declared, voice ringing with newfound strength. "For ourselves, for those who came before us, and for those who might come after." The crew moved as one, stepping into the labyrinthine corridors leading toward the station's core. Each step was a battle not just against the entity's manifestations, but against their own fears and fading grip on reality. Hallucinations clawed at their minds, memories twisted into nightmarish visions. Yet, amidst the cosmic dread, a fragile hope flickered, a beacon in the endless silence. Inside the heart of the station, where the psychic field pulsed strongest, they faced the ultimate test. Captain Voss initiated the shutdown sequence, her fingers trembling over the controls as the entity lashed out, assaulting their minds with waves of despair and isolation. Malik supported her, grounding reality with scientific focus, while Jax and Sergei fought off physical and mental intrusions. The echoes of the lost crew whispered warnings and pleas, their voices interwoven with the entity's anguished cries. Elena's mind teetered on the edge, memories of her lost crew threatening to overwhelm her. But she held firm, drawing strength from the faces of her team. "We are not alone," she repeated, a mantra against the void. "We will cross this threshold together." As the final commands were entered, a brilliant pulse of energy surged through the station, unraveling the psychic field. The entity's forms dissipated, leaving behind a profound silence, different now, less oppressive, tinged with the faintest promise of peace. Breathless and shaken, the crew gathered once more in the central chamber. The station trembled, its systems failing irrevocably, the rogue planet's gravity pulling it ever closer. They had crossed the threshold not only between madness and survival, but between despair and hope. Captain Voss looked at her crew, eyes shining with unshed tears. "We did it," she whispered. "But the silence, it's not over. Not really." Jax cracked a tired smile. "Then we keep moving, one step at a time." And with that fragile determination, they prepared for the final escape, their hearts heavy but resolute against the endless night beyond the silent orbit. The endless silence outside waited, vast and indifferent. But within the battered crew, a new light flickered, a fragile defiance against oblivion. The boundary had been crossed. What lay beyond remained unknown, but for now, they were still human, still fighting, still alive. The threshold was behind them. The abyss awaited, and the story was far from over. The corridor to the station's core was a gauntlet of shadows and silence, every step taken by Captain Elena Voss and her team echoing faintly against the cold metal walls. The emergency lights flickered in a pale, intermittent blue, casting long, trembling shadows that seemed to writhe with unseen life. The oppressive quiet was broken only by the distant, almost imperceptible whispers that slithered through the air, clawing at the edges of their minds. Elena's breath formed small clouds in the chilled atmosphere of the derelict station, her sharp eyes scanning ahead with a blend of steely resolve and the vulnerability of one who faced not just a physical threat, but the intangible terror of the unknown. Behind her, Malik Arman adjusted the settings on his portable scanner, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the flickering light as he monitored the psychic readings that spiked with each step deeper into the abyss. "The field's intensity is off the charts," he murmured, voice low but steady. "It's like wading into a storm that's as much mental as it is physical." Jack Simmons walked beside them, his usual smirk replaced by a tense grimace. His fingers twitched anxiously, occasionally brushing over the array of hacking tools strapped to his belt. When they reached the core chamber's entrance, a swirling vortex of pulsing blue light greeted them, the tangible heart of the psychic field and the echo entity's domain. The air thrummed with energy, subtle vibrations that seemed to penetrate their very bones. "This is it," Elena said, her voice a calm anchor amidst the rising tide of dread. "We sever this connection, or we lose ourselves to the silence." Lina Ortega steadied her breath beside Sergei Volkov, who tightened his grip on the makeshift weapon fashioned from station components. Their eyes met briefly, a silent pact of trust and determination forged in the crucible of shared terror. The procedure began with Jack's interfacing with the archaic terminal nestled at the chamber's core. Sparks flew as the station resisted the intrusion, systems flaring erratically. Hallucinations danced at the edges of Jax's vision, fleeting images of the lost crew, their faces twisted in silent screams, shadows reaching out like desperate phantoms. His hands trembled, but he forced himself to focus. Almost there, he whispered, sweat beading on his brow. "Just a few more seconds." Meanwhile, Malik channeled his scientific knowledge and empathy to guide the team through the psychic maelstrom. The boundary between reality and nightmare thinned dangerously. Distorted echoes of past crew members flickered around them, silent pleas for release, ghostly hands brushing against flesh that wasn't there. Each member felt the weight of isolation, the crushing loneliness that birthed the echo entity itself. Elena's mind reeled as memories of her own losses intertwined with the station's tragic history. She gritted her teeth, fighting the encroaching madness. "Hold tight," she commanded, voice steady despite the chaos within. Minutes stretched like hours, the psychic storm intensified, threatening to swallow them whole. Yet through combined will and resolve, the team began dismantling the field's core systems. The blue vortex faltered, flickering like a dying star. Suddenly, the station groaned, a deep, resonant sound of metal and energy straining against collapse. Alarms blared, forcing the crew into frantic action to maintain balance and keep their footing as the psychic connection unraveled.
"We're breaking it!"
Malik shouted over the cacophony, eyes wide with a mixture of scientific exhilaration and primal fear. But the cost was clear. Jack staggered, clutching his head as the last vestiges of hallucination clashed with fading consciousness. Lena and Sergei moved to stabilize him, their presence a lifeline tethering him to reality. Elena took a breath, steadying herself against the shuddering bulk of the station. "Almost done. Keep pushing." The psychic field's collapse was not just a technical failure, it was a tearing of the fabric between life and oblivion. As the blue light dimmed and the whispers faded, a profound silence settled. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was a fragile promise of survival and the hard-won hope of escape. Exhausted but alive, the crew gathered their strength for the final push. Ahead lay the uncertain path back to their ship, back to normal space forever changed by what they had endured in the silent orbit. But even as they moved, the question lingered in Elena's mind: had they truly escaped the abyss? Or had the silence simply found a new home within their souls? The boundary between here and the void was thinner than ever, and the cosmic dread that had pursued them remained a shadow at the edge of their existence. The central hub of the derelict station pulsed with a faint, fluctuating blue light, casting long shadows against the cold metal walls. Captain Elena Voss stood at the control console, her fingers steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Around her, the rest of the crew moved with cautious urgency, their eyes flickering between screens and each other as the psychic field that had imprisoned them for so long began to unravel. Status. Elena's voice cut through the thick silence, which now felt less like a shroud and more like the fragile breath of hope. Dre. Malik Arman's gaze was fixed on the diagnostic readouts. The energy matrix is destabilizing faster than predicted. The field's coherence is breaking apart. We were witnessing the collapse of the psychic barrier. Jack Simmons leaned against a nearby console, his usual smirk replaced by a rare seriousness. Feels like the whole station's holding its breath. Lena Ortega's voice was steady, calming. All comms systems are coming back online, slowly but surely. The silence is fading. Sergei Volkov stood guard, his eyes scanning the dim corridors, alert to any residual threats. Keep your heads. This isn't over until the last pulse dies. The atmosphere was electric, charged with a tension that made every breath feel deliberate. Outside the viewport, the rogue planet loomed, a dark sentinel against the infinite blackness of space. But inside the station, light was returning, both literal and metaphorical. Elena's mind flashed back to the countless nights she spent alone, haunted by the ghosts of her previous crew and the crushing silence that seemed to consume everything. Now that silence was breaking apart, unraveling at the edges like a frayed thread. Malik, what's the risk of residual energy? Elena asked, glancing at the scientist. He adjusted his glasses, eyes sharp behind the lenses. There's a chance some fragments might linger, echoes of consciousness, residual psychic imprints. They could cause lasting psychological effects. Then we need to prepare for that, she said firmly. We can't let this end with us broken. A sudden surge rocked the station. The blue light intensified, swirling like a vortex around the core of the psychic field. The crew braced themselves as a low hum resonated through the metal corridors, growing louder until it filled every inch of the station. Jax's voice was barely audible over the rising noise. Here it comes, hold tight. The energy crescendoed, a brilliant cascade of shifting light and shadow, as the psychic barrier shattered. Visions flickered before their eyes, faces of the original crew, trapped memories. Fragmented emotions all released in a flood of consciousness that surged through the station before dissipating into the void. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 1,000 souls lift from her shoulders. Yet, beneath the relief, a hollow ache settled deep within her, a reminder of the cost of their ordeal. When the light finally dimmed, the station was quiet again, but this time the silence was different. It was not oppressive. It was vast and empty, a canvas awaiting new stories. Malik let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. It's over. The entity is gone. Lena smiled faintly, reaching out to clasp Sergei's arm. We did it, together. But Jax's eyes still darted around, wary. Doesn't feel like the end. More like a beginning or a warning. Elena nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the stars beyond. We carry the silence with us now. And whatever echoes remain, we'll face them as one. The station's systems hummed back to life, and for the first time in months, the crew allowed themselves a moment of peace. Yet, the memory of the echo entity lingered, a shadow woven into the fabric of their minds. As the rogue planet slipped silently beneath the horizon, the survivors prepared to leave the silent orbit behind, forever changed, haunted, but unbroken. The resonance of silence had passed, but its echo would ripple through the vastness of space, a testament to the fragile boundary between existence and oblivion. and somewhere in the infinite black, a whisper remained waiting. The ship's engines hummed steadily as the vessel broke free from the rogue planet's shadow, gliding back into the familiar expanse of normal space. Outside the viewport, stars glittered with cold clarity, the vast cosmos stretching endlessly. Yet inside the cabin, the silence felt heavier than ever, laden with the echoes of what had transpired. Captain Elena Voss stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the void beyond the glass. The scars of the silent orbit the derelict station, the echo entity, the psychic field were etched not just in her memory, but in the very marrow of her being. Her breath was shallow, the weight of command settling anew. The mission was over, the immediate threat past, but the journey home was just beginning. The psychological shadows haunted each crew member differently, but none would escape unmarked. Elena's fingers brushed against the worn leather cover of her journal, a constant companion throughout this nightmare. Retreating to her quarters, she closed the door behind her and settled at the small desk bathed in soft light. She uncapped her pen and paused, staring at the blank page. The words came slowly, each sentence a fragile thread weaving through the tangle of grief and resolve. "Survival is not merely escaping death," she wrote, but confronting the silence that follows. "I carry their memories, the crew I lost before, and those who vanished in the orbit's cold embrace. Leadership is a heavy mantle, weighted by guilt and hope in equal measure." The room was quiet but for the scratch of ink on paper, a sound that felt more real than the distant hum of the ship's systems. Elena allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability, acknowledging the deep well of sorrow and determination within. Her thoughts drifted to Malik, whose calm logic had been a beacon, and to Jax, whose bravado masked a heart grappling with abandonment. Lena's steady empathy and Sergei's protective vigilance had been the glue holding them together. In the common area, the atmosphere was subdued but not broken. Malik adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses as he leaned toward Jax, their conversation low but earnest. "The forces we encountered defy our understanding," Malik said, voice measured. "But there's still so much to learn. Perhaps what we faced was a mirror of loneliness, fear, the cosmic void reflecting itself in our minds." Jax nodded, his usual smirk softened into something more reflective. "I never thought I'd see the stars feel so empty. But maybe there's a way to fill that silence by sticking together, by facing the unknown without losing ourselves." Their words carried a tentative optimism, a fragile hope that defied the cosmic dread still clinging to their souls. Nearby, Lena and Sergei stood side by side near the airlock, eyes cast out into the infinite. The silence between them was comfortable, a shared acknowledgement of the trials endured and the uncertain road ahead. Sergei's broad shoulders relaxed slightly, his stern expression softened by a rare smile. Lena's warm brown eyes caught his gaze, and without words, they understood that the bonds forged in the shadow of the silent orbit would endure beyond the void. As the ship charted a course back to inhabited space, each survivor wrestled with their own ghosts. The cosmic silence that had threatened to consume them still whispered in their minds, a reminder of humanity's fragile place in the infinite. Yet, amidst the lingering dread, a spark remained of resilience, connection, and hope. Captain Voss closed her journal and looked once more through the viewport. The stars were cold and distant, yes, but they were also a promise that even in the vast silence, life endured. The journey home was uncertain, but it was theirs to make. With steady breath and quiet resolve, she prepared to lead them into whatever awaited beyond the veil of darkness. The endless silence had left its mark, but it would not be the end. Not yet. The endless silence outside the hull of their battered vessel, the rogue planet drifted, a dark sentinel swallowed by the endless void. Its silent orbit carried with it the remnants of a nightmare few could fully comprehend, yet all bore the weight of. The observation deck was dim, the soft hum of failing life support systems the only companion to the chilling blackness beyond the reinforced viewport. Captain Elena Voss stood apart from the others, her eyes tracing the cold silhouette of the planet as it shrank into the distance. A pale crescent hallowed faintly by the distant stars. The silence was absolute, yet it roared in her mind. Around her, the rest of the crew gathered, those few spared by the station's merciless grasp. Malik Arman adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his gaze distant but searching, as if the stars themselves held answers he had yet to unlock. Jack Simmons leaned against the bulkhead, his usual smirk softened into a wary line, the weight of things unseen etched into his features. Lina Ortega and Sergei Volkov stood near the communications console, their bodies still taut from the endless tension, but softened now by the shared relief of survival. Voss's fingers trembled slightly as she pulled a worn journal from her jacket pocket, the leather cover scuffed and creased from years of use. She settled into a seat, the chair's cold metal a stark contrast to the warmth flooding her chest, an ache of memory and loss. The pen in her hand hovered for a moment before the scratch of ink filled the quiet, a litany of confessions, regrets, and fragile hope. We escaped the silence. But it follows us still. The void is not empty, it listens, waits, and remembers. Each shadow in that station was a whisper of dread, a fragment of souls lost to the endless dark. We are changed, marked by the silence that consumes all light and hope. Yet, in this vast cosmos, our survival is a small beacon, a fragile defiance against oblivion. Her words were a prayer and a warning. Malik approached quietly, breaking the spell with a tentative voice. "Elena, I've been reviewing the data again. The psychic field, the echo entity, it wasn't malevolent in the way we feared. Loneliness, isolation. It became a force, a consciousness born of despair. It's a mirror of ourselves, our fears made manifest in the void." Voss nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the journal. "Understanding that, it doesn't make it easier. But it means we're not alone in our terror." Jax's voice was low, stripped of its usual bravado. "I thought I was running from my past, from being abandoned. But out there in the station, I faced something bigger, the silence. It made me see how small we really are, how easily we re-swallowed whole." Lina stepped forward, her warm brown eyes meeting each member's gaze. "Maybe that's why we have to hold on to each other. To be the noise in the silence." Sergei's stern face softened for a moment, a rare crack in his gruff exterior. "We survived because we fought, because we didn't let the silence win." The observation deck seemed to pulse with the weight of their shared resolve. Outside, the rogue planet continued its silent voyage, indifferent to the lives it had touched and the shadows it cast. Voss closed her journal, the final lines a testament to their ordeal and endurance. "In the endless silence, we find our humanity. Not in the noise nor the light, but in the quiet moments between, the fragile space where life clings to meaning against the abyss. We are but whispers in the cosmic dark, yet we endure." A cold breeze from the station's vent whispered through the room, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible hum, the echo of a distant star. The heartbeat of the universe itself. It was a reminder that beyond the silence, life and mystery persisted, infinite and unknowable. And so they sat, survivors of the silent orbit, bound by shared loss and the unyielding vastness of space. Their future was uncertain, shadowed by the memory of what they'd faced, and the silent darkness waiting beyond the stars. But in that silence, they had found a strange kind of peace, a quiet defiance against the void. The endless silence was no longer a void to fear, but a vast expanse to respect, and a solemn reminder of humanity's fragile place within it. As the ship powered up its engines, the survivors prepared to leave behind the rogue planet's orbit, carrying with them the scars and lessons of the station. The stars awaited, cold and silent, offering no answers, only the promise of unknown horizons. The silence would follow them always, but so would their courage. The end.